That little tattoo. What is this, some college girl's first mistake? The room exploded with laughter. Every single man in that clubhouse laughed at her. And Emily Walker didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't say a single word. She just walked past all of them, past the mockery, past the noise, past 30 men who had already decided she was nothing, and picked up a wrench. What happened next silenced every one of them. And by the end of this story, you will understand why that tattoo wasn't a mistake. It was a memorial. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and follow Emily's journey all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The heat in Arizona in the middle of July is not something you adjust to. It is something you endure. It presses down on everything, on the asphalt, on the rooftops, on the backs of your hands when you reach for something. It soaks into metal until metal burns. It turns air into something thick and difficult to move through. And on the particular afternoon that Emily Walker pulled her truck into the gravel lot outside the Hells Angels clubhouse on the outskirts of Tucson, that heat was doing what Arizona heat always does in July. It was making everything worse. She sat in the cab of her truck for exactly 43 seconds. Not because she was afraid, because she was calculating. There is a difference between hesitation and assessment. And Emily Walker had spent enough years in situations far more dangerous than a biker clubhouse to know the difference intimately. She counted the motorcycles parked outside. 19. She noted the 2 men standing near the side entrance who were pretending not to watch her truck. She clocked the position of the main door, the side door, the loading bay around the back that she had already memorized from the satellite image she pulled up the night before. She noted that the man closer to the building was left-handed by the way he held his cigarette. She noted that the man farther from the building had a knee injury, favoring his right leg, just slightly, probably an old one, maybe a riding accident, maybe something else. Then she picked up her worn motorcycle helmet from the passenger seat, grabbed the small metal toolbox from behind her, and stepped out into the heat. She didn't walk fast. She didn't walk slow. She walked the way people walk when they've been in enough rooms where walking wrong could cost you everything. The 2 men by the side entrance watched her the whole way to the front door. She didn't look at them. Looking at someone you've already assessed is a waste of attention. She already knew everything about them that mattered for right now. She pushed the front door open. The noise hit her before anything else. Voices. Loud ones. The particular kind of volume that happens when a group of men who are used to taking up space gather in an enclosed room. Music underneath it all. Something old, something with bass and weight. The smell of motor oil and cigarette smoke and leather and beer. All of it layered together into a specific atmosphere that most people would have found intimidating. Emily had been in rooms that smelled like burning diesel and blood and fear. This was not intimidating. This was just loud. There were 31 men in the room. She counted without appearing to count, the way you learn to take inventory of everything around you without broadcasting that you're doing it. Most of them noticed her immediately. A woman walking into the Hells Angels clubhouse in Tucson, Arizona, carrying a motorcycle helmet and a toolbox, was not something that happened every afternoon. Several conversations stopped. Several heads turned. The music kept going. Emily walked toward the center of the room and set her toolbox down on a workbench near the far wall. Nobody said anything for about 4 seconds. Then Big Ray Morrison opened his mouth. Ray Morrison was the kind of man who had been the loudest person in every room he'd ever entered since approximately age 16. He was 6'3" broad through the shoulders, with hands that looked like they'd been designed for a larger species. He had road names and reputation, and the particular confidence of a man who had never once been made to feel small, and therefore had no framework for understanding what it might feel like. He saw the tattoo on Emily's wrist when she set the toolbox down. It was small. A black raven, detailed and precise, surrounded by a thin chain that wrapped around it like it was bound. The kind of tattoo that meant something to the person wearing it. The kind of tattoo that was not decorative. Ray did not know any of that. Ray saw a small tattoo on a young woman's wrist, and his brain went exactly where it always went when Ray saw something he could use to fill a room with noise. "Hey," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, which was the point. Emily looked up. That little tattoo. He pointed at her wrist. What is that? Is that a what a bird? He looked around at the men near him, already grinning because he knew what was coming. Is this some college girl's first mistake? The room exploded. 31 men, and the laughter came from most of them. The kind of group laughter that feeds on itself, that gets louder because it's already loud, that turns into something with a life of its own once it starts. Emily looked at Ray for exactly 2 seconds. Then she turned away. She picked up her toolbox and walked past every single one of them toward the back corner of the garage. There was an old Harley Davidson sitting there, a 1978 Electra Glide that had seen better decades. It had been sitting in that corner for 8 months. 3 different mechanics, experienced ones, men who had been working on Harleys since before Emily was born, had looked at it, worked on it, and walked away, shaking their heads. It was the kind of machine that had given up. Emily crouched down next to it. She didn't say anything. She opened her toolbox. She selected a wrench, and she started working. The laughter was still going in the background. Some of it was at her expense. Some of it had moved on to other things the way group laughter does. Ray was still making comments. Someone near the bar repeated the college girl line. A couple of the younger members were grinning and watching to see what she'd do. What she did was work, not the performance of working. Not the careful, self-conscious movements of someone trying to prove something while people watched. She worked the way a surgeon works. Precise, economical. Every movement had a reason. Every tool she picked up got used for what it was designed for and then put back. She was not looking around to see if anyone was watching. She was listening to the machine. There is something about watching someone who is genuinely good at something that eventually cuts through even the loudest room. It takes a few minutes sometimes longer. But real competence has a specific quality to it that the human eye recognizes even when the human brain hasn't caught up yet. The laughter got quieter. Not all at once. Gradually. The way a fire gets quieter when the wood starts running out. One of the younger members drifted a little closer to the corner where Emily was working. Not right up close, just close enough to see what she was doing. He watched for maybe 90 seconds and then drifted back to his friends. Whatever he saw made him quiet. Ray made another comment. Something about whether she needed a manual. 3 people laughed, but it was thinner than before. Emily kept working. 20 minutes in, she had the carburetor disassembled on a clean cloth she'd laid out beside the bike. She was working through each component with a methodical patience that was almost meditative. Her hands were already dark with grease. Her expression was exactly the same as it had been when she walked in the door. 35 minutes in, Logan Hayes walked out of his office. Logan Hayes was the president of the Tucson chapter, and he was not a man who moved quickly or spoke without reason. He was in his mid-50s, not particularly large, with gray, working its way steadily through his dark hair. He had this kind of face that had been weathered by decades of sun and wind, and the specific kind of stress that comes from leading a group of strong-willed, dangerous people without getting anyone killed. He came out of his office because someone told him there was a woman working on the old Electra Glide. He stood at the edge of the garage area and watched. He watched for a long time. Long enough that a couple of the men noticed him watching and got quiet themselves. Emily didn't look up. She knew he was there. She had registered the change in the room when he walked out. The slight shift in the energy that happens when the person with the most authority enters a space. She had learned to read rooms the way other people read books, automatically, constantly, without thinking about the process. She kept working. At the 58-minute mark, Logan checked his watch. Emily stood up, wiped her hands on her bag, and looked at the bike for a moment. Then she reached down and turned the ignition. The engine coughed once, then it caught, then it roared. The sound of that engine was something that nobody in the room had heard in 8 months. The old Electra Glide had been a dead machine for so long that some of the newer members had stopped believing it would ever run again. It had become part of the furniture almost, a monument to something that didn't work anymore. And now it was running. The sound rolled through the whole building. The conversation stopped. All of them. The music felt quieter, even though no one had turned it down. 31 men were looking at the back corner of the garage where Emily Walker was standing next to a motorcycle that was very much alive and running. Nobody said anything. Emily reached down and turned the engine off. She started packing her tools back into the toolbox in the same methodical way she'd unpacked them. The silence held. Then Ray Morrison said something, and this time his voice was different, not loud, not performing for the room, just a word or two almost to himself, and even from across the garage, you could hear that something had shifted in it. He said, "How?" Not a question with a question mark, just the word. Flat and genuine and slightly bewildered. Emily closed her toolbox. She looked up and found Ray Morrison in the crowd. She held his gaze for exactly the amount of time it takes to make a point without making a confrontation. Then she said, "I learned how to fix things that were already broken." She picked up her toolbox, she picked up her helmet, and she walked toward the exit. Logan Hayes stepped into her path, not aggressively, not to block her, just to exist in the space between her and the door, which was a thing that people did when they wanted to have a conversation and weren't quite sure how to start it. He said, "You have somewhere to be." Emily looked at him. "Not particularly." "Then maybe you stay for a while." It wasn't a question, but it wasn't an order either. It was an offer. The specific kind that only gets made when someone has earned it quickly, and the person making it knows they're doing something unusual. Emily considered him for a moment. "Depends," she said. "On what?" "On whether I'm going to have to listen to jokes about my tattoo all afternoon." Logan looked across the room at Ray Morrison. Ray Morrison looked like a man who was experiencing something unfamiliar. "No," Logan said. "You're not." Emily set her toolbox down again, and that was the beginning. The next few days were not easy. They were not meant to be. Nobody in that clubhouse opened their arms to Emily Walker just because she fixed a motorcycle. The Hells Angels had not spent decades building what they had by trusting people quickly. Trust in that world was not given. It was established through time and observation and the particular kind of evidence that doesn't lie. But something had changed in the room. Not dramatically, not all at once. The kind of change that happens under the surface in the way people look at someone when they think that person isn't paying attention. Emily was always paying attention. She came back the next morning. No one had asked her to. No one had told her not to. She arrived before most of the others let herself into the garage through the side door and started looking at the other machines that needed work. There were 4 of them in various states of disrepair. She organized her tools on the workbench, got a cup of coffee from the machine in the corner, and was deep in the engine of a 2003 Road King before the first other member arrived. His name was Danny. He was 26, one of the younger members, and he was the one who had drifted over to watch her the day before. He came into the garage and stopped when he saw her already there. "You're back," he said. "The Road King needs a new fuel pump," Emily said without looking up. "And somebody put the wrong oil in it. There's a filter problem too." Danny blinked. "I know about the fuel pump. The oil thing, nobody caught that. The owner probably noticed the bike running a little rough, but couldn't identify the cause. It's not obvious unless you know what to look for." Danny pulled up a stool and sat down about 6 feet away. Not trying to help, not getting in the way, just watching. After a few minutes he said, "Where'd you learn all this?" "Here and there," Emily said. "That's not an answer." She glanced at him. "No, it's not." He nodded slowly. He was smart enough to understand that she knew exactly what she was doing by not answering. "Okay," he said. "Fair enough." They worked in silence for a while. Well, Emily worked. Danny watched. But after about 20 minutes, he picked up a rag and started cleaning a part she had set aside, and Emily didn't say anything to stop him. And that was how they arrived at a kind of unspoken working arrangement that would end up mattering more than either of them knew at the time. Ray Morrison came in at 10 in the morning, which was apparently early for Ray. He came in, saw Emily at the workbench, and stopped walking. Emily did not look up from what she was doing. Ray stood there for a moment. Then he walked to the coffee machine, got himself a cup, and leaned against the counter. He was quiet for longer than Emily would have expected from someone with his particular energy, and when he spoke, it was not in the loud performing voice he'd used the day before. "That bike," he said. "The Electra Glide. 3 guys tried to fix that thing." "I know," Emily said. "I could tell from the disassembly. They were all looking in the wrong place." "Where were they looking?" "The ignition system. It was the carburetor. Specifically, the main jet was clogged in a way that mimicked an ignition problem. You could spend a year on the ignition, and it would never run right." Ray was quiet. Then he said, "You figured that out how fast?" "About 11 minutes. Another silence. Ray drank his coffee. "I said something rude yesterday," he said finally. Emily kept working. "I'm saying it now," Ray said. "I was rude. You didn't do anything to deserve that." Emily set down the tool she was holding and looked at Ray Morrison for a moment. She studied him the way she studied everything, not unkindly, but completely. And then she said something that surprised him. "How long have you been in this club?" Ray blinked. 22 years. And in 22 years, have you ever had someone walk in here who you didn't immediately size up and put into a category?" Ray opened his mouth and then closed it. "I'm not saying you're a bad person," Emily said. She picked up her tool again. "I'm saying you're a human, and humans make assessments. The question is whether you're the kind of person who can change them when the evidence changes." Ray Morrison stood there with his coffee cup and his 22 years of reputation and his 6'3" frame. And he looked at this young woman with grease on her hands and a raven tattoo on her wrist, and he said, "Yeah, I think I am." "Good," Emily said. "Then we're fine." And they were. Not immediately best friends. Not even close, not yet. But fine. The particular kind of fine that was actually the beginning of something. Logan Hayes watched all of this from various positions of near invisibility. This was one of his skills, not the same kind of skill Emily had, not the tactical assessment of a trained specialist, but the long-practiced ability of a leader to observe without being observed. To take the temperature of a room without anyone knowing he was reading it. What he was reading now was something he didn't have a clean category for. He had spent 30 years in and around this world. He had met mechanics who could do remarkable things with engines. He had met fighters who moved like water around obstacles. He had met people who could read a room so thoroughly it was almost supernatural. He had never met one person who was clearly all three. The tattoo had been nagging at him since the first moment he'd seen it. Not because it was unusual. Most of the people in his world had tattoos that meant things. But the raven, the chain around it, the specific placement on the inside of the wrist where you'd see it every time you reached for something, every time you picked something up. That was not decoration. That was deliberate placement. He waited until the afternoon when the garage had emptied out somewhat, and he walked over to where Emily was finishing up the Road King. "It's running," she said before he got there. She hadn't looked up. "Test ride would confirm it, but the problem is solved." "Thank you," Logan said. He meant it. The Road King belonged to one of his oldest members, a man named Carver, who had been heartbroken about the machine for 3 months. He pulled a chair over and sat down. Emily looked at him. She waited. "That tattoo," Logan said. Emily's hands went still for just a fraction of a second. Then they kept moving. "The raven," Logan said. "That's not a fashion choice." "No," Emily said. "It's not." "You want to tell me what it is?" She was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that isn't absence that's full of something being decided. "Not yet," she said. Logan nodded. Okay. He didn't push. He was not a man who pushed, and even if he were something in the specific quality of Emily's stillness, told him that pushing would be the wrong choice. "Can I ask you something else?" he said. "You can ask." "When you walked into this room yesterday, and I mean the moment you walked in before you set anything down, you knew exactly where every person in this room was." It was not a question. Emily said nothing. "You tracked every entrance and exit within about 15 seconds, Logan said. "You clocked Morrison before he said a word. And when you walked to that bike in the corner, you chose a path that kept your back to as few people as possible." Emily set down her tool. She looked at Logan Hayes with something that might have been respect, the careful, reserved kind that gets extended to people who are perceptive enough to deserve it. Most people don't notice that, she said. Most people aren't looking for it, Logan said. I'm always looking for it. Why? Because the people who move like that, and there aren't many of them. In my experience, they either come from law enforcement or they come from somewhere more complicated. Emily was quiet. You're not law enforcement, Logan said. He was certain of that. The certainty came from 30 years of being able to tell. So where do you come from? She picked up her wrench again. She turned it over in her hands once, twice, looking at it rather than at him. I come from a place where you learn fast, or you don't come home at all, she said. Logan let that sit in the air between them for a moment. And did you come home? He asked. Emily looked up at him, and something crossed her face, fast, quickly controlled, but real. The kind of thing that lives in the part of a person that training can suppress, but never completely eliminate. Eventually, she said. Logan stood up. He put the chair back where he'd found it. He said, the club is going out Thursday night. Nothing complicated. Just a run up toward Sedona and back. You're welcome to come. Emily looked at him. You might want to bring that helmet, he added. She almost smiled. Almost. I'll think about it, she said. She went. Thursday came and she showed up with her helmet and the same worn leather jacket she seemed to own in place of anything else, and she took one of the bikes that Carver offered her, the Road King she'd fixed, which he insisted on, which was its own kind of acknowledgement, and she rode. And this was where something that had been hidden began to be visible. Because Emily Walker on a motorcycle was not the same as Emily Walker at a workbench. At a workbench, you could tell she was skilled. You could tell she was precise and methodical and deeply experienced with mechanical things. On a motorcycle moving through the Arizona desert at speed, with the Sedona red rocks rising in the distance, and the dry wind, and the long straight roads that seemed to go on forever on a motorcycle, you understood something different about her. You understood that this was not a learned skill. This was not training. This was the only place she was completely free. She rode like the road belonged to her. Not recklessly, never recklessly. Emily Walker did not do anything recklessly. Recklessness was for people who hadn't yet understood what the consequences of errors looked like, but with a complete absence of hesitation. She moved through traffic with the same economy she moved through a room. She read the road the way she read people ahead of time before anything happened, always positioned so that whatever came next had already been accounted for. Danny rode alongside her for a while, and afterward when they stopped he said, "How long have you been riding?" "Since I was 17, Emily said. "Who taught you?" She paused with a water bottle halfway to her lips. "My dad," she said. On a 1969 Sportster that had no business running as well as it did. She took a drink. He kept that thing alive with prayers and stubbornness. It was the most personal thing she had said to anyone in the clubhouse. Danny recognized that. He was careful with it. "He still ride?" Danny asked. "He's gone," Emily said. Short, complete. A door that was partially open and then wasn't. "I'm sorry," Danny said. "It was a long time ago," Emily said. But the way she said it told him it wasn't. Not really. Not in the ways that matter. The Thursday run became a regular thing. Not every week, but often. And Emily's presence on those runs became something that the club adapted to with the particular unconscious ease of people who have decided without quite saying so that someone belongs. She never asked to belong. She never performed for it. She just showed up, did what she did, and let the belonging happen or not happen on its own terms. And slowly, gradually, it happened. Ray Morrison was the most visible sign of the change. He had gone from being the loudest critic to being something closer to an unlikely advocate. He didn't make a production of it. Ray was not a subtle man, but he was a man who understood that the way you fix something you broke was to be different going forward, not to make speeches about how different you were now. So he was simply different. He was the first one to ask her opinion when something mechanical wasn't working right. He included her in conversations that would have excluded her before. And once when a newer member made a comment about her being there, Ray turned to look at him with the kind of expression that ended that particular conversation permanently. Emily noticed all of it. She noticed everything. What she was less certain about was what to do with it. She had not been in one place for more than a few months in 3 years. She had moved from city to city, state to state, taking mechanical work where she could find it, never staying long enough for anyone to know her well enough to ask the questions she couldn't answer. She had developed a specific set of habits around being invisible in the ways that mattered, and present enough in the ways that were necessary, and those habits had served her well through 3 years of careful, deliberate rootlessness. The clubhouse was threatening those habits, not aggressively. Not in any way she could have pointed to and said, "Here is the threat. Here is what I need to guard against." It was subtler than that. It was the way Danny asked her genuine questions and listened to the answers. It was the way Carver had told her quietly and without any fanfare that the Road King had never run better and that he was grateful. It was the way Logan moved through the space around her with a consistent, undemanding respect that she was not used to from anyone. It was the way the tattoo on her wrist sometimes caught the light in a certain way when she was working, and instead of the usual feeling, the sharp familiar ache, she felt something else. Something that was harder to categorize. She was sitting alone in the garage one evening late, after everyone else had gone working on a transmission, by the light of a single work lamp when she heard footsteps. She had the wrench repositioned in her hand and her body oriented toward the sound before the thought to do it had fully formed. It was Logan. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her posture. "That's the fastest I've ever seen anyone do that," he said. Emily relaxed her grip. She set the wrench down deliberately. "Sorry," she said. "Don't be," Logan said. He walked into the garage and sat on a crate near the door. That kind of reflex doesn't come from a bad place. It comes from training. Emily looked at him. "Why are you still here? It's almost 11. I could ask you the same thing." "Transmission needed finishing," she said. "I had paperwork," he said. "And I wanted to talk to you." "About what?" Logan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been running this chapter for 19 years. In that time, I have had a very specific experience with people who have training like yours. The kind of awareness, the kind of physical instinct." Emily waited. "They don't walk into biker clubhouses looking for mechanic work," Logan said. "Not usually." "I'm not usual," Emily said. "No," Logan said. "You're not. And I've been patient. I've given you space. I've not pushed." He paused. "But there's something coming. And I need to know who's in my house before it arrives." The air in the room changed. Emily set down the part she was holding. "What's coming?" she said. "Trouble," Logan said. "The vanguards have been building towards something for 2 months. I can feel it. I've been in this long enough to feel it before it arrives. And when it does, I need to know the people standing next to me." Emily looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at the tattoo on her wrist. The raven. The chain. She had not told anyone about it. Not the full story. Not even close. She said, "Give me a little more time." Logan looked at her. He seemed to be running some internal calculation, weighing what he knew, what he sensed, what he could afford to leave unknown. "How much time?" he said. "As much as it takes," Emily said. "Or not much. I don't know yet." Logan nodded slowly. He stood up from the crate. "The thing I can tell you," Emily said before he reached the door, "is that whoever is in your house, I'm not a danger to this place or these people." Logan turned. "I believe you," he said, and he meant it. "Good night, Emily." "Good night," she said. She heard the door close. She heard his truck start in the parking lot. She heard it pull away. Then she was alone with the work lamp and the unfinished transmission and the night sounds of the Arizona desert and the tattoo on her wrist. She pressed her right hand over it, over the raven and the chain. "Still here," she said quietly. To herself. To the tattoo. To the person the tattoo was for. And then she picked up her wrench and went back to work. The trouble Logan had predicted arrived on a Wednesday. It came the way trouble usually comes, not announced, not dramatic in the way movies suggest. It came as a phone call to Logan at 2 in the morning, and then a chain of messages, and then 3 of the club members arriving at the clubhouse, looking tense and grim, and then Logan making calls, and more members arriving until by 4 a.m. There were 22 people in the main room of the clubhouse, and the atmosphere was the particular kind of thick and dangerous that Emily recognized from rooms she'd been in on different continents in different uniforms in a different life. She had gotten a text from Danny at 2:15 a.m. It said only at the club. Something happened. You should probably come. She was there by 2:45. When she walked in, Logan looked up from the center of a group of men, and whatever he saw in her face, the steadiness, the readiness, the complete absence of panic, something in him relaxed slightly. "Glad you're here," he said. "What happened?" she said. A man named Terrence, who handled the club's storage arrangements, explained. The Vanguards, the rival club Logan had mentioned, had hit one of their secondary storage facilities on the east side. They'd gotten in clean, taken several things that had significant value, and left a message behind. The message was specific, personal, and unmistakably a challenge. "They want us to ride out," said one of the men near the window. His name was Marcus, and he was one of the louder voices in the room, and his voice right now was tight with the specific kind of anger that comes from being deliberately provoked. "Tonight, hit them back before they get comfortable." There were sounds of agreement from several others. Emily had been standing near the door listening. Now she stepped forward. "No," she said. The room turned. She said it again. "No, not tonight. Not like this." Marcus stared at her. "Excuse me." "I understand the impulse," Emily said. Her voice was level, clear, carrying without being raised. "They hit you. They left a message. They want a response. And you want to give them one." "That's right," Marcus said. "And that is exactly what they're counting on," Emily said. The room was very quiet. "Think about the timing," she said. "They hit you at what time?" "Around midnight," Terrence said. "And the message they left was designed to what? Get us to ride out angry," Danny said slowly from the back of the room. He was watching Emily with an expression that was new, like he was seeing something come into focus. "Get you to ride out angry," Emily confirmed. "At 2 a.m., on their timeline, toward a location they chose, into a situation they've had time to set up." She paused. "Does that sound like a response, or does that sound like walking into a second attack?" The room was silent. Marcus said, "How do you know they're setting up?" "Because it's what I would do," Emily said quietly. "If I wanted to take something from your enemy, and I wanted to make the taking worse, I would take it in a way that made them angry enough to come to me. On my ground. On my schedule. In the dark." Silence. Logan was watching her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. "So what do we do?" Marcus said. His voice was different now. The anger was still there, but there was something else underneath it. "You wait," Emily said. "You don't go tonight. You don't go tomorrow. You take 2 days to find out everything you can about where they are, what they have, how many of them there are. You plan. And then you move on your timeline, not theirs." Marcus looked at Logan. Logan looked at Emily. He said, "She's right." The room shifted. The specific crackling energy of 30 men wanting to move and fight and respond began slowly, reluctantly, but genuinely to settle. "How do you know all this?" Marcus said. He was looking at Emily differently now. Not with the dismissal from before. With something that was almost disoriented, the look of someone whose map of the world has just been revised without warning. Emily looked at him. She looked around the room at all of them, at Danny and Ray and Carver and Terrence and Logan and all the rest. She looked down at the tattoo on her wrist. And then she said 7 words that changed everything. "Because it's not the first time." She said nothing else. But every person in that room understood that they were standing next to someone who had been in rooms like this before. Not the same rooms, but the same shape of room, the same weight of decision, the same cost of getting it wrong. And none of them, not one, laughed. The next 48 hours were like watching a different kind of machine run. Not mechanical, human. The kind of organized, purposeful movement that happens when a group of people who are used to operating on instinct and emotion suddenly find themselves thinking instead. Emily didn't take over. She was careful about that. These were not her people to command. Logan was the president. Marcus and the others had authority and history and relationship in this world that Emily had not earned and was not trying to claim. What she did was advise. Quietly. Specifically. One person at a time, mostly Logan, but sometimes Danny, who turned out to have a remarkably tactical mind underneath the easygoing exterior, and sometimes Terrence, who knew the geography of the East Side better than anyone. She asked questions more than she gave answers. Where exactly was the storage facility in relation to the Vanguard's main location? What were the roads in and out? How many people had the Vanguards typically moved in groups in past conflicts? What time of day were they usually most active? She took the information and she built a picture from it. And the picture told a story. They expected you to ride out that first night, she said to Logan on the second day. When you didn't, they didn't know what to do. They're waiting. They're watching your usual spots expecting movement. Meanwhile, this road, she indicated a route on the map between them, is completely unwatched. Logan looked at her. How sure are you? Based on what you've told me about their patterns, 70%. Those aren't perfect odds. No, Emily said. They're not. They're the odds you get when you don't charge in blind. Logan was quiet. Then he said, What's your read on the risk to my people? Emily met his eyes. Significantly lower than if you'd ridden out Wednesday night. I won't tell you there's no risk. I won't tell you I'm certain. But this, she touched the map, is the approach with the most control. Logan nodded slowly. Tell me what you need, he said. Emily looked at the map. A small team, she said. People who can move quietly and follow instruction in the field. 5, maybe 6, not 30. Logan looked up at her. And you'll come, he said. Emily looked at the tattoo on her wrist. She had spent 3 years running from rooms like this, from decisions like this, from the weight of being the person who knew what to do in the kinds of situations where knowing what to do could be the difference between people going home and people not going home. She had told herself she was done with it. She had moved from city to city and fixed machines and kept her head down and been nobody's strategist and nobody's specialist and nobody's anything. And here she was. Here it was. Yes, she said. I'll come. She chose the team with Logan. Danny was on it. She had seen him under pressure now, and he was steady, which mattered more than experience in certain situations. Ray Morrison, who despite his loudness was, she had learned genuinely capable when the situation required it. A woman named Torres, who had been quiet and peripheral. In most of the time Emily had spent in the clubhouse, but who had in the past 48 hours revealed a coolness under pressure that Emily recognized and trusted. And Terrence for his knowledge of the territory. The night they moved, there was a half-moon and dry air, and the particular silence of the Arizona desert at 2 in the morning that is not the same as quiet anywhere else. Emily briefed the team before they left. She was precise. She gave everyone a clear role. She was specific about what each person should do if something went wrong, not in a way designed to frighten, but in a way designed to ensure that fear of the unknown didn't become a problem in the field. Ray Morrison listened to her brief with an expression that had no trace of the man who had laughed at her tattoo. When she finished, he said, I want you to know something. Emily looked at him. Whatever you are, Ray said. Whatever your story is. I'm glad you walked through that door. Emily held his gaze for a moment. Something moved through her fast, quiet deep. Let's get through tonight first, she said. Then we'll talk about stories. They moved out. Everything Emily had predicted held. The route was clear. The position she had identified was exactly as unguarded as she had assessed it would be. The team moved with a precision that surprised even Logan, who was watching from a coordination point, and that precision came from Emily, managing the margins, the small adjustments, the course corrections, the reading of real-time information against the plan. And then Logan moved into a position that Emily had calculated as safe. And it wasn't safe. She saw it a fraction of a second before it happened. a detail she had filed away in the briefing that suddenly reorganized itself in her mind and told her that the calculation was wrong, that one variable had shifted, and that Logan was walking toward danger, and she had about 3 seconds to do something about it. She moved. She crossed 30 feet of dark terrain in a way that left no room for any assessment of risk because the assessment was already done, and the only output was movement. She reached Logan with one hand, redirected his momentum, kept him moving without stopping, without explaining, without anything except getting him past the point of danger before the danger arrived. Then it was over. They stood together in the dark, Logan slightly breathless, with the sudden movement, Emily completely still. "What was that?" Logan said quietly. "You were about to walk into something you couldn't see," Emily said. Logan looked back at where he'd been heading. He looked at Emily. "How did you—" "Later," Emily said. "We're not done." They completed the operation. The team came home. Nobody was hurt. When they were back, and the adrenaline was settling, and the relief was spreading through the group in the particular way it does when something difficult has ended well, Logan gathered everyone together. He looked at Emily. "I need to say something," he said, "in front of everyone." Emily said, "You don't have to." "I do," Logan said, "because they deserve to hear it." He looked around at the team, at Danny and Ray and Torres and Terrence. "This woman is the reason we all went home tonight. She built a plan that worked. She kept her head when it mattered, and she saved my life out there." The room was quiet. "I don't know her full story," Logan said. "She hasn't told it yet. But what I know is this: she walked into this house and some of us laughed at her." He looked at Ray, not unkindly. "And she never gave us less than everything she had in return." He looked at Emily. "So I'm asking you now," he said, "in front of everyone. Who are you?" Emily stood in the center of the group. She looked at the faces around her. Ray Morrison and his changed expression. Danny, with his steady, attentive eyes. Torres, who had gone through the same night and came out steady. Carver at the back, who'd said almost nothing, but whose presence was solid and constant. She looked down at the tattoo on her wrist. The raven. The chain. She had carried this story alone for 3 years. She had told herself that carrying it alone was safer. For her. For everyone else. That bringing it into the light would make it more real than she could bear. But she was standing in a room full of people who had gone into the dark with her tonight. Who had trusted the plan she built. Who had come back. She had not been able to save everyone. She knew that. She would always know that. But she had saved these ones. And they were looking at her. And the weight she had been carrying felt for the first time in 3 years like something that might be shareable. She raised her wrist. She let the work lamp light fall on the raven tattoo. She said, her name was Sarah. The room held its breath. "She was my partner," Emily said. "My teammate. The best soldier I ever worked with. We were a 2-person extraction team. Military. Special Operations Rescue. We spent 4 years going into places that most people will never know existed to bring people home who couldn't bring themselves home." Nobody moved. 2 years ago, on a mission that went wrong in a way that missions that go wrong usually go wrong fast and without warning and with no good options. I had to make a choice. I could complete the objective or I could go back for her. She paused. I completed the objective. I brought the team home. And I lost her. The tattoo on her wrist seemed in the silence to mean everything it actually meant. "I got out after that," Emily said. "I didn't know how to be the person who made that choice and then kept going in that world. So I left, and I moved around, and I tried to find a place where I could just fix things and not have to be that person anymore." She looked at Logan. She looked at Ray. "I don't think I found that place," she said. "But I think I might have found something else." She lowered her wrist. The room stayed quiet for another moment. Then Ray Morrison, the loudest man in every room he'd ever entered, spoke very softly. He said, "You found us." And Emily Walker, former elite military rescue specialist woman, who had survived things that most people would not survive, who had carried a story alone for 3 years, through city after city, and job after job, and the long-distance running of a person who has not yet found anywhere to stop. For the first time in a long time, She did not immediately look for the exit. She looked at the people around her. And something in her face, something that had been held very carefully, very tightly for a very long time, eased. Just slightly. Just enough to mean everything. The morning after, nobody slept. Not really. A few of the men stretched out on the couches in the back room, eyes closed, but the kind of closed that isn't rest. It's just the body going still, while the mind keeps running. Emily sat at the workbench in the garage with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, and she didn't drink it, and she didn't move, and she didn't sleep either. She had said Sarah's name out loud. She had not said it out loud in 2 years. Not to anyone. She had thought it every day it arrived without invitation. Sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes in the middle of a sentence about something completely unrelated. Sometimes when she was elbow deep in an engine and her hands were moving on their own, and her mind wandered into the one territory she was always trying to keep it out of. But she had not said it to another person, and now she had. In a room full of people she had known for only a few weeks. She was trying to figure out how she felt about that. The door from the main room opened, and Danny came in. He had a fresh cup of coffee in each hand. He set one down next to her without saying anything, took the cold one away, and pulled up a stool. They sat in silence for a moment. "You okay?" he said finally. "Define okay," Emily said. "Fair point." He drank his coffee. "I've been thinking about what you said last night. About Sarah." Emily was quiet. "You don't have to talk about it," Danny said quickly. I'm not asking you to explain anything. I just want you to know that what you told us last night, it didn't change anything about how I see you." Emily looked at him. "I mean that," he said. "If anything, He stopped, started again. "I've met people who did difficult things and used it as a reason to be hard. Like the difficulty made them better than everyone else. You're not like that." "What am I like?" Emily said. Not challenging, genuinely asking. Danny thought about it seriously the way she'd noticed he always thought about things he cared about, not reaching for the first available answer, but actually looking for the honest one. "You're like someone who learned a terrible thing," he said, "and decided that the right response was to be careful with other people, because you know what it costs when things go wrong." Emily looked down at the workbench. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "She would have hated this place." Danny blinked. "Sarah," Emily said. There it was again, the name. "She hated loud, she hated crowds, she was the quietest person I've ever met in my life, which is saying something given what we did. In the field she was like a thought. There and then, not there. You couldn't track her unless she wanted you to." She shook her head slightly. "In a regular room she was uncomfortable. Too much noise. Too many people." A pause. She would have lasted about 4 minutes in this clubhouse before she walked back out. Danny was watching her with careful attention. "She sounds like she was something," he said. "She was everything," Emily said. She was the best of what we were supposed to be. The thing we were all trying to be." She picked up the new coffee cup. Her hands were steady. "I keep thinking I should be over it by now. 2 years. People tell you 2 years is enough time." "People who tell you that have never lost anyone like that," Danny said. Emily looked at him. Something in her eyes shifted. "No," she agreed quietly. "They haven't." The garage door opened and Logan came in. He looked at both of them, read the room the way he always did, and didn't apologize for interrupting, and didn't make it awkward. He just walked over and pulled a chair up on the other side of the workbench. "How are you?" he said to Emily. "Danny already asked me that." "I'm asking again." Emily looked at Logan Hayes, this man who had watched her from the moment she walked in and said nothing until there was something worth saying. This man who had trusted her assessment when he had no logical reason to trust it, and whose trust had been returned with a night that nobody got hurt. "I've been better," she said. "I've been worse." "That's about right," Logan said. He wrapped his hands around his own coffee cup. "I want to say something to you, and I want you to hear it as it's meant." "Go ahead." What you did last night, not just the operation, the plan, all of that, but what you did at the end. When you told us about Sarah, about yourself." He paused. That took more courage than anything that happened out in the field. Emily looked away. "I know you probably didn't sleep," Logan continued. "I know you're sitting here trying to figure out whether you said too much, whether you gave something away that you can't get back." He leaned forward slightly. "You didn't. You gave something to a room full of people who needed to understand who was standing with them. That's not weakness, that's leadership." The word hit Emily somewhere unexpected. She felt it land. "I'm not your leader," she said. "No," Logan said. "But you could be something to this place, if you wanted to be." He held up one hand. "I'm not asking for a decision. I'm not making any kind of offer tonight that requires an answer. I'm just saying the door is there, you can see it, and it doesn't close." Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Logan." "Yeah." The vanguards aren't done. The atmosphere in the room changed in an instant. Logan and Danny both straightened slightly the way people do when the conversation pivots from emotional to operational. "I know," Logan said. "Last night was a message answered," Emily said. "They'll read that. They'll adjust. Whatever they plan to do next, they'll change it because we didn't respond the way they expected." She set down the coffee cup. "That's good. But it also means we don't know what comes after the adjustment." "What do you think comes after?" Logan said. "I think they come at something personal," Emily said. "Not the storage, not the property, the people." Logan was very still. "They know they can't outmaneuver you on resources," Emily said. "Not long term. So they go after the thing that hurts more than resources. They go after the human element." Danny said quietly, "You mean they go after the members?" "Or the people the members care about," Emily said. The sentence landed in the room with a weight that all three of them felt. Logan stood up slowly. His jaw was set. Not with anger, with the controlled, measured tension of a man who is thinking very hard and very fast, and keeping the thinking separate from the feeling, because right now the thinking was what mattered. "I need to make some calls," he said. "You should," Emily said. "And you should make them today, not tomorrow." Logan nodded. He was halfway to the door when he turned back. "Emily," he said. She looked at him. "You're not doing this alone," he said. "Whatever you've been carrying, you're not doing it alone anymore." He walked out. Danny looked at Emily. Emily looked at the cold workbench. The raven on her wrist caught the light for a fraction of a second. "He means that," Danny said. "I know," Emily said. "Do you believe it?" She thought about that for a long moment. "I'm working on it," she said. Danny nodded like that was exactly the right answer. The day moved forward, the way days do when something significant has happened, and the world hasn't quite adjusted to it yet. In fits and starts with long stretches of ordinary activity, interrupted by moments of sharp, clear reality. Logan made his calls. People arrived through the morning. The clubhouse filled up with the particular energy of a group on alert, not panicked, but aware. The way a body tenses when it hears a sound it can't immediately identify. Emily worked. She went through the remaining machines in the garage with a thoroughness that was partly professional, and partly the thing she always did when she needed to keep her hands busy so her mind could process. She fixed a brake problem on Marcus's bike. She replaced a clutch cable on a 2001 Softail that had been slipping for months. She adjusted the carburetor settings on 3 different machines because the altitude and the summer heat together were affecting performance in a specific way that nobody had thought to compensate for. Word had gotten around about what she'd told the group the night before. She could tell by the way people moved around her. Not with pity. Nothing like that. These were not people who expressed themselves through pity, but with a different quality of attention. More deliberate. More present. The casual half-acknowledgement of someone you've grown used to having around had shifted to something that felt more like regard. Ray Morrison came into the garage at noon. I didn't say anything at first. He stood near the door and watched her work, and the silence between them was not uncomfortable. In the weeks since Emily had arrived, she and Ray had arrived at a specific kind of understanding, Not warm exactly, not close, but honest. The way two people can be honest with each other once the pretense has been stripped away and there's nothing left to perform. I want to ask you something, Ray said. Okay, Emily said without looking up. The night of the operation, when you moved Logan out of the way. He paused. How did you know? Emily's hands slowed slightly on the part she was working. I'd filed away the geometry of the position, she said. When we were planning, there was a detail that I'd assessed as low risk, and then during the operation something shifted. Another element moved, and the calculation changed. I reran it in about half a second, and the output was different. Ray was quiet for a moment. Half a second, he said. Approximately. Most people, Ray said slowly, would have needed about 30 seconds to even notice something had changed. Yes, Emily said. How do you do that? Not skeptical, genuinely asking. Emily set down the tool. She thought about how to explain something that had become so built in that the mechanism was hard to see from the inside. When I was in training, she said, the instructors used to say that awareness isn't a switch you turn on. It's a habit you build until it runs all the time. Like your heartbeat. You don't think about your heartbeat, it just goes. She picked the tool back up. I spent 4 years building that habit in places where the alternative to awareness was that someone didn't go home. After a while, you stop noticing that you're doing it. It just runs. Ray absorbed this. Does it ever turn off? He said. Emily looked up at him briefly. No, she said. Ray nodded slowly. That sounds exhausting. It is, Emily said. It's also why I can sleep anywhere, because by the time I get tired enough to sleep, I'm actually tired. No such thing as lying awake worrying when your nervous system has already processed everything in the room 17 times. Ray laughed. It was a genuine one, short, and surprised, the kind that gets through before you think to filter it. Emily almost smiled. I owe you an apology, Ray said. His voice dropped back down to something quieter. You already apologized, Emily said. I apologized for the tattoo comment, Ray said. I haven't apologized for the way I was thinking, the way I sized you up the moment you walked in and decided before you said a word or did a thing that you were someone I didn't have to take seriously. Emily stopped working. She looked at Ray Morrison, this large, loud man who had laughed the hardest and who had changed the most visibly, and who was now standing in a garage trying to articulate something that clearly didn't come easily to him. I've done that my whole life, Ray said. Walked into a room and sorted people into categories before I knew them. And most of the time, I got it right enough that I never had to question whether the habit was a problem. He paused. You were the first time in a long time I got it wrong enough to see it. Most people never see it, Emily said. Yeah, well. Ray shrugged uncomfortably. Apparently all it takes is someone who knows how to fix an engine better than 3 mechanics combined, and then goes and saves the president's life in the dark. He paused. Should have set the bar lower for myself. Emily looked at him for a moment. Ray, she said. Yeah. The apology was already accepted, the first time. She held his gaze. Stop carrying it. Ray blinked. Then he nodded. Once. The kind of nod that means something. Okay, he said. He turned to go. Ray, Emily said again. He looked back. You're a better man than the version of yourself that walked in this garage 2 days ago, Emily said. Don't waste that. Ray Morrison stood in the doorway for a second, and something crossed his face that was very close to the specific expression of a person who has just been given something they didn't know they needed. Yes, ma'am, he said quietly, and he left. Emily turned back to the Softail. Her hands moved automatically, finding the rhythm of the work, but her mind was somewhere else for a moment, somewhere in the territory of the unexpected, in the strange and disorienting experience of being in a place where people kept surprising her with their capacity to do better than they'd started. She had not expected that, not here. She hadn't expected a lot of things about this place. Torres came in around 2 in the afternoon. She was carrying 2 sandwiches, and she set one down next to Emily's tools without asking, the way people do when they're not performing generosity, but just doing it because it's practical and right. You need to eat, Torres said. Thank you, Emily said. She picked up the sandwich. Torres sat down and unwrapped her own. She was a compact, self-contained woman in her early 30s with short dark hair and an economy of expression that Emily had noticed from the first day and recognized as a kindred quality. Torres didn't perform. She didn't fill silences for the sake of filling them. She was present or she wasn't, and when she was fully there. They ate for a while without talking. Then Torres said, "Can I ask you something about last night about the field?" "Go ahead." "When you moved Logan." Torres paused. "You didn't hesitate." "No," Emily said. "Not even for a second." "There wasn't a second to spare," Emily said. Torres was quiet for a moment. "I froze," she said. Her voice was completely level, but there was something under it, the specific kind of honesty that costs something to say. "I saw you move, and I knew something was happening, and for about 3 seconds I was completely still. I couldn't make my body do anything." Emily looked at her. "That's normal," Emily said. "It didn't feel normal." "It is," Emily said. "The freeze response is not a character flaw. It's neurological. It's your brain trying to process threat faster than your motor system can respond. 3 seconds is actually fast." She set down the sandwich. "Did you know what to do when the freeze broke?" Torres nodded. "I moved to the position you'd briefed." "Exactly right," Emily said. "That's the function of a good brief. It gives your body somewhere to go when your mind is catching up. You did what you were supposed to do." Torres absorbed this. "You learned that from your training." "I learned it from watching people freeze and watching what happened when they had a plan to come back to and what happened when they didn't," Emily said. "The plan is what saves people, not the absence of fear." Torres looked at her for a long moment. "I want to learn," Torres said. "What you know, the awareness, the reading the room, the field assessment." She paused. "Not because I want to do what you did, because this club is my family, and I want to be useful to them in a real way." Emily looked at her carefully. "You already are," Emily said. "More," Torres said simply. Emily considered her. "Okay," she said. "We start tomorrow morning." Torres nodded. No excessive gratitude, no performance of relief. Just a simple nod, and then she picked up her sandwich again, and Emily did the same, and they finished eating in a comfortable quiet. It was the beginning of something that neither of them named yet. The afternoon was when the first bad news arrived. It came through Logan, who had been on and off his phone all day with the focused, controlled intensity of a man managing something significant without broadcasting how significant it was. At 3:30, he came into the garage where Emily was still working, and he stood at the workbench and he said, "I need you." Emily set the tool down. "What happened?" she said. "Marco," Logan said. "He's one of our members, East Chapter. He wasn't at the operation last night. He left the clubhouse around midnight before everything went down." Logan stopped. "He's not answering his phone. His apartment is empty. His bike is gone." Emily was very still. "How long has he been unreachable?" she said. 11 hours, Logan said. "Does he go off-grid normally? Turn his phone off, disappear for a while?" "Never," Logan said. "Not without telling someone." "Did he have any conflict with the Vanguards? Any personal history with them?" Logan's jaw tightened. 2 years ago, Marco testified in a case that put away one of the Vanguard's senior members. He's been on their radar since. The sentence landed like a stone in still water. Emily absorbed it. "They didn't just adjust the plan," she said quietly. "They already had a second move ready. They were ready for us to not respond on Wednesday night." Logan was looking at her with an expression that said he had already come to the same conclusion and was hating every second of it. "They moved on Marco," Emily said. "That's what I think," Logan said. "Do you know where he'd go if he were running not taken? If he got spooked and ran on his own, where would he go?" Logan thought for a second. "There's a place. Out past Maricopa. An old property. He's used it before when he needed to be away from everything. Almost nobody knows about it." "Almost," Emily said. "3 people," Logan said. "Me, his brother, and one other person." "Who's the third person?" Emily said. Logan's expression told her before the words did. "Carver," he said, and Emily's mind moved very fast through the architecture of what that meant. Carver, who had said almost nothing since the operation. Carver, who had been present and peripheral and quiet. Carver, whose road king she had fixed on the second day, who had thanked her quietly and sincerely, and who she had filed away as steady and trustworthy. She said, "Where is Carver right now?" Logan said, "I don't know." The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then Emily said, "Get the team together, the same 5 from last night. Do it now and don't make noise about it. Don't make it look like what it is." "You think Carver?" "I think we don't know enough yet to think anything for certain," Emily said. Marco is either hiding or he's not, and either way, the answer starts with finding him before anyone else does. Logan had his phone out before she finished the sentence. Danny came in 7 minutes later. Then Torres. Then Ray, who took one look at Emily's face and went very quiet, in a way that said he had learned in the last 12 hours that Emily's expression at this particular register meant the situation was serious. Terrence came in last. He was on his phone, and he ended the call when he walked in, and he said, "I've been trying to reach Carver." Everyone looked at him. "He's not answering either," Terrence said. "The room held that information," Danny said slowly. "Carver has been in this club for 14 years. "I know," Logan said. "He's never—" "I know," Logan said again, quietly, with the specific weight of a man who is holding something very painful, very carefully. Emily said, "We don't know what Carver has or hasn't done. We don't know anything about him yet, except that he's not answering and that he knew about Marco's property." She looked at each person in the room. "What we know for certain is that Marco is missing. Everything else is a variable. We work with what we know." Torres said, "What do we need?" "The location of the property," Emily said. "And we need to move before dark." Logan gave her the address. She memorized it in one pass, the way she'd been trained, not repeating it, not writing it down, just placing it in a specific mental architecture where it would stay until she needed it. "3 of us go," Emily said. "Logan, you stay here. You're the president and this club needs its president present and visible right now. If people see you leave, it creates a question mark." "I don't like that," Logan said. "I know," Emily said, "but it's right." She looked at Ray and Torres and Danny. "The 3 of us. We go now." Ray said, "What if Carver is already there?" Emily looked at him. "Then we'll know the answer to one of our questions." The drive to the property outside Maricopa took 50 minutes. Torres drove because she knew the roads. Ray sat in the back with a tense, coiled stillness that was the most focused Emily had ever seen him. Emily sat in the front passenger seat, and she didn't speak for most of the drive, and didn't need to, because she was running through the variables, the possible configurations of what they might find, the appropriate response to each one, the margins of each scenario. The property was a low building set back from the road behind a line of scrubby desert vegetation. There was one truck parked outside that Emily didn't recognize. There were 2 motorcycles. Torres stopped the car before they got close. "2 bikes," Ray said from the back seat. "Marco's would be 1, Emily said. Nobody said the obvious thing about the second one. Torres said quietly, "How do we do this?" Emily looked at the building. "We go to the door," she said. "No weapons drawn, no aggression. We go to the door and we knock and we see who answers. We read what we get." She looked at Torres, then at Ray. "Whatever we find in there, we don't lose our heads. Not until we know." They got out. They walked to the door. Emily knocked. Silence for 4 seconds. 5. 6. Then footsteps. Slow ones. Someone who wasn't in a hurry, or someone who was moving carefully. The door opened. Carver stood there. He looked at Emily. He looked at Ray. He looked at Torres. His expression moved through something complicated, something that started as surprise, and then became something that looked unmistakably like relief. "I've been waiting," he said. "I didn't know who to call." Emily said, "Is Marco here?" "He's here," Carver said. He stepped back from the door. "He's hurt, Not badly, but they got to him before I did. Ray made a sound. Emily put her hand briefly on Ray's arm. Not a restraint, just a contact, a grounding, and she walked through the door first. Marco was sitting against the far wall. He was in his early 40s, heavy-set, with the look of a man who had been through something frightening recently and was trying to hold the pieces of himself in order. He had a cut above his left eyebrow that had been roughly bandaged. His left wrist was wrapped. He looked up when Emily walked in, and there was no recognition in his eyes because they had never met. "Who are you?" he said. "Someone Logan sent," Emily said. "Are you okay?" "Been better," Marco said. His voice was rough. "They came to my apartment, 2 of them. I heard them in the hallway before they got to the door and I ran." He paused. "I called Carver because I didn't know who else might be. I didn't know who was safe." Emily looked at Carver. Carver met her eyes. "I've been trying to figure out who in our circle has been talking to the vanguards," Carver said. His voice was completely flat. "I've been trying to figure it out for 3 weeks." The room was very still. 3 weeks, Emily said. "Something was off," Carver said. "Little things, information getting out that shouldn't have gotten out. Moves we made that they seemed to be ready for." He looked at Ray. "I didn't say anything because I didn't want to point at anyone without being sure. And I thought if I said it out loud and I was wrong, it would tear something apart that didn't need to be torn." Ray said, "Who is it?" Carver was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," he said. "But I know it's someone close. Someone who knew about the storage facility before last Wednesday. Someone who knows our patterns." The statement moved through the room like a cold current. Danny said from the doorway where he'd positioned himself, "That's a short list." "Yes," Carver said, "it is." Emily was doing the math. She was running the names, the access, the knowledge required, the patterns Carver had described. She was building the picture from the pieces that were available, and the picture was incomplete, but it had a shape, and the shape was something she recognized. She said to Carver, "You need to tell Logan all of this, tonight. Everything you've noticed, every detail, no matter how small. He needs the complete picture." "I know," Carver said. "I was trying to protect people. I didn't think about it being the wrong move." "It wasn't wrong," Emily said. "It was careful. But now careful has to become action." She looked at Marco. "Can you travel?" she said. "Yeah," Marco said. He started to stand. Torres moved to help him without being asked, fitting her shoulder under his arm, with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it before. "We get you back to the clubhouse," Emily said. "You're not staying here alone, not tonight." "I wasn't planning on it," Marco said. His voice had something in it now, something that hadn't been there a minute ago. Something that sounded like it might become gratitude once the shock wore off enough to make room for it. They moved back to the car. Carver locked the property and followed. The drive back was different from the drive out, fuller, heavier, loaded with what they now knew and the much larger question of what it meant. Because there was someone inside the Hells Angels Tucson chapter who was feeding information to the vanguards. And Emily Walker, who had come to Arizona looking for a quiet place to fix broken machines and stop being the person who knew what to do. In impossible situations, was sitting in the front seat of a car in the Arizona dark, running names and patterns and access points through a mind that had never once in all 3 years of trying managed to stop working. She looked down at the tattoo on her wrist. The raven caught in its chain. She pressed her right thumb against it lightly. The way she always did when she needed to remember why precision mattered. Why it was worth it to do the hard thing carefully instead of the easy thing carelessly. Why, when everything was uncertain and the variables kept multiplying and the picture kept changing, the answer was always to go back to what you knew for certain and build outward from there. She knew the vanguards were not done. She knew someone inside was helping them. She knew Marco was safe for now, and that now was what they had to work with. She knew that whoever was talking to the vanguards would know by tomorrow morning that Marco had been found, which meant the window to move on the internal problem was narrowing. And she knew something else, something she had not yet said to anyone in the car. She knew that 3 weeks ago, before the storage facility, before the operation, before any of this, someone would have needed access to the club's communication to know which moves to give away. And in her mental list of who had that level of access, there were 4 names. One of them had walked into the garage that afternoon and eaten lunch with her and said she wanted to learn. Emily looked at her hands in her lap. She hoped she was wrong. She was rarely wrong. The clubhouse lights were still on when they pulled into the lot. Logan was at the door before the car stopped completely, and when he saw Marco step out with Torres's help, something crossed his face that moved through relief and landed somewhere close to fury. The specific fury of a leader who has almost lost someone and is now processing what that means for everything he thought he knew about his world. He crossed the lot in 6 steps and got his arm around Marco's shoulders and said something in a low voice that nobody else could hear. And Marco said something back, and Logan's jaw tightened, and he nodded. Then he looked at Emily over Marco's head. She looked back at him. There was a conversation in that look. A full conversation, the kind that passes between people who have arrived at a specific understanding of each other. It said, "There is more that we know now, and some of it is worse than what we started with, and tomorrow we deal with it, and tonight we deal with tonight." Logan gave her one small nod. She returned it. Then she walked past everyone and back into the garage and picked up the wrench she'd set down 7 hours ago, because the Softail still needed its clutch cable tensioned correctly, and the job wasn't finished, and Emily Walker did not leave jobs unfinished. Ray found her there 20 minutes later. He leaned against the doorframe. He didn't say anything for a while, neither did she. Then Ray said, "You knew something was wrong before we got in that car tonight." "I suspected," Emily said. "That's not the same as knowing." "No," she said. "It's not." He was quiet again. "Emily," he said. "Yeah. Is this going to get worse before it gets better?" She considered the honest answer. "Yes," she said. "Probably." Ray absorbed that. "Okay," he said. "Just that. Flat and real and without drama." Emily glanced at him briefly. "You're not going to ask me to fix it," she said. "I'm not going to ask you to do anything," Ray said. "You'll do what you do. I'll do what I do. That's how it works." Emily turned back to the machine. Something in her chest, something that had been wound tight for weeks, for months, for 2 years, loosened a small amount. Not all the way. Nowhere near all the way. But something. "Get some sleep, Ray," she said. "You too," he said. He left. She kept working. The raven on her wrist caught the light of the work lamp once more, and she looked at it for a moment, and she thought Sarah would have hated this place. And then, for the first time since she'd said it to Danny, she thought the thing she usually didn't let herself think Sarah would have been good at it anyway. Because Sarah had been good at everything that mattered, even the things she hated, especially those. Emily pressed her thumb against the tattoo one more time. Then she picked up her wrench. There was still work to do. The name sat in Emily's mind all night like a splinter she couldn't reach. Torres. She didn't say it. She wasn't ready to say it because saying it turned a suspicion into an accusation and an accusation. In a place like this, aimed at the wrong person could do damage that no amount of correct intelligence could repair afterward. She had learned that lesson in a different world, in a different uniform, on a night that ended with 2 relationships destroyed and 1 career ended, and the truth turning out to be something entirely different from what the accusation had assumed. So she kept the name inside, and she kept working through the night, and she let the suspicions sit where suspicions are supposed to sit, in the part of your mind that processes, without concluding, that watches, without deciding, that holds uncertainty as uncertainty and doesn't rush it into something more comfortable. By 4 in the morning, the Softail was finished. By 5, she had started on an oil leak in a dyna that had been waiting for attention since before she arrived. By 6, the desert light was beginning at the edges of things, and the clubhouse was making the first sounds of people waking up. Footsteps, voices, the coffee machine running. Danny found her first, which was becoming a pattern. He stopped in the doorway, looked at her, looked at the dyna, looked at the dark circles that she definitely had and was definitely not going to mention. "Did you sleep at all?" he said. "I worked," Emily said. "That's not the same thing." "It is for me." Danny came in and poured 2 cups of coffee from the machine in the corner and brought one to her and didn't make any comment about how cold she looked or how long she'd been there, or any of the things that would have required her to acknowledge that she was not entirely okay. She drank the coffee. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Okay," Danny said. "And I need you to answer it as honestly as you can, even if the honest answer is that you don't know." "All right," he said. His voice was careful now. He could hear what was underneath her voice. "Torres," Emily said. "Just the name. Nothing attached to it." Danny was completely still. "How long has she been with the club?" Emily said. "About 2 years," Danny said slowly. "Who brought her in?" Danny set down his coffee cup. He was doing the thing she'd noticed he always did when something landed hard, going very still and very internal, running it through before he responded. "Carver," he said. Emily closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Then she opened them. "And before she was here," Emily said. "What do you know about her background?" "She said she'd been with the Phoenix chapter," Danny said, "before she moved to Tucson." He paused. "I don't know if anyone verified that." Emily said nothing. Danny said, "You think it's her?" "I think it might be her," Emily said. "I'm not certain. I need more before I'm certain." "What kind of more?" "The kind that doesn't come from me asking questions," Emily said. "Because if I'm right and she knows I'm looking at her, the thing she does next will be worse than anything she's done so far. And if I'm wrong—" She stopped. "If you're wrong," Danny said quietly, "you've damaged someone who doesn't deserve it." "Yes," Emily said. Danny picked his coffee back up. He held it in both hands. He was working through something. "She asked to train with you," he said. "Yesterday. She came to me and said she wanted to learn and she was going to ask you." "I know," Emily said. "She asked me directly." "And you said yes," Danny said. "I said yes." Danny looked at her. "Why?" Emily met his eyes. "Because if she's who I think she might be, the worst thing I can do is change my behavior and let her know she's being watched. And because," she paused, "because if she's not, then she's exactly what she said she is, and she deserves to learn." Danny was quiet for a moment. "That's a cold calculation," he said. "Not judgmental, just observing." "Yes," Emily said. "It is." "How do you live with making calculations like that?" Emily looked down at her wrist. The raven. The chain. "Some days better than others," she said. Logan arrived at 7, which was earlier than usual. He came in through the back and went straight to Emily, which told her he had been thinking through the same things she had been thinking through possibly all night, possibly in the same approximate order. He stood at the workbench. He didn't sit. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said. Emily told him. Everything in the precise, organized way she had of delivering information, no editorializing, no emotional framing, just the facts in the sequence that made their meaning clearest. The access required. The timeline. The 3-week pattern Carver had identified. The list of people with sufficient proximity to the information. The name at the intersection of all the variables. Logan listened without interrupting. When she finished, the silence lasted a full 20 seconds. Then he said, "Torres has been here 2 years. She rode with us on the operation 2 nights ago." "I know," Emily said. "She knew the plan," Logan said. His voice had changed. Something was happening underneath it. "Yes," Emily said. "Which is why we need to move carefully. If she passed information about the operation before we executed it, and the vanguards chose not to use it, that would be consistent with someone who is playing a longer game. Letting one operation succeed to maintain their position, waiting for a more valuable moment." Logan's jaw was tight. "What's the more valuable moment?" Emily looked at him directly. "I don't know yet, but they're building toward something. The storage facility Marco, the information feed, these aren't random. They're steps." "Steps toward what?" "Toward something that ends with this chapter unable to function," Emily said. "That's my read. They don't want a war. A war would cost them too. They want a collapse, internal. Something that looks like it came from inside." Logan was very still. "If this club looks like it can't maintain security," Emily said. "If it looks like information leaks and people can't be trusted and the president can't protect his own members, what happens?" Logan's expression was dark. We lose standing. Other chapters lose confidence. The whole structure gets questioned. Yes, Emily said. Logan turned away from her. He put his hands flat on the workbench and looked at them and breathed for a moment in the measured way of a man managing something that is trying to become anger and needs to be kept as clarity. How long do we have? He said. Not long, Emily said. Marco's safe, which they'll know by morning. Whoever is passing information will report that. Once they know we found him and we brought him in, the timeline accelerates. Because they'll know we're looking, Logan said. Because they'll know we're looking, Emily confirmed. Logan straightened. He turned back to face her. What do you need? He said. I need 1 day, Emily said. 12 hours. Give me 12 hours to confirm what I suspect before anyone moves on it. Can you do that? What happens in 12 hours? Logan said. Either I have proof or I have a reason to look somewhere else, Emily said. Either way, you have something solid to stand on. Logan looked at her for a long moment. In that look was everything the weight of 19 years leading people who trusted him, the cost of being wrong, the cost of waiting too long, the particular loneliness of being the person who has to make the call. 12 hours, he said. Thank you, Emily said. Don't thank me yet, Logan said. He picked up his phone and walked back toward his office. At the door, he stopped. Emily. She looked up. Whatever you find, he said. I need to know before anyone else acts on it. You come to me first, whatever it is. Understood, she said. He left. Danny had been quiet through all of it. Now he said, What do you need me to do? Emily thought for a moment. Be normal, she said. Whatever you usually do today, do that. Talk to people the way you always talk to them. If Torres mentions anything about the operation, or about Marco, or about me, you remember what she said. Word for word if you can. Got it, Danny said. And Danny. She looked at him. Don't let her see you looking at her. Danny nodded once. I know, he said. I've watched you do this for 2 weeks. I've picked up a thing or two. Despite everything. Something almost like warmth moved through Emily. Good, she said. Now go be normal. Danny left. Emily turned back to the diner. She had 12 hours, and she intended to use every minute of them. The morning session with Torres happened at 9 as they'd agreed. Emily met her in the side room off the garage that had enough space to work without being in the main area. Torres arrived exactly on time, which was itself a data point. Emily cataloged it automatically the same way she cataloged everything. They started with the basics. Not because Emily thought Torres needed basics, but because starting with basics gave Emily 90 minutes of close observation in a controlled environment, where she could watch how Torres moved, how she held her body, how her eyes tracked the room, how she responded to surprise. What Emily discovered in those 90 minutes was complicated. Torres was good, genuinely naturally good in a way that extended beyond anything you'd develop just by being around a biker club for 2 years. She read positions in a room with a precision that was too clean to be entirely self-taught. When Emily introduced a simulated surprise, dropping something behind Torres to make a sudden loud sound, Torres's response was fast, controlled, and correct. Too correct. The kind of correct that comes from specific training. But her emotional responses were completely natural. When Emily pushed her into uncomfortable territory, asked pointed questions, created brief moments of pressure, Torres responded the way a genuinely honest person responds. Not the flatness of someone performing. Not the micro-tells of someone managing a cover. Real reactions, real uncertainty, real discomfort. Emily had been trained to identify people who were running covers. She had done it successfully in situations where the stakes were life and death. And she could not find a clean read on Torres. Which meant either Torres was one of the best cover operators Emily had ever encountered, or Emily was wrong. Both possibilities were deeply uncomfortable. By the time the session ended, Emily had more information and less certainty than when she'd started, which was not the outcome she'd been working toward. Torres said, "Same time tomorrow." "Yes?" Emily said. Torres nodded and left. Emily stood alone in the side room and pressed the heel of her hand against her forehead and let herself have 30 seconds of something that was close to frustration before she put it away and started rebuilding the analysis from scratch. She was halfway through the rebuild when Carver found her. He came in quietly, which was his way, and he stood near the door with his arms crossed and his face doing the thing it did when he was working up to saying something he wasn't sure how to say. "You know something," he said. "I suspect something," Emily said. "There's a difference." "Who?" She looked at him. "I'm not going to tell you that yet," she said, "because I'm not sure enough, and because the last thing this club needs right now is a rumor." Carver absorbed that. He didn't push, which she respected. "I want to tell you something," he said, "about why I didn't come forward sooner, when I first noticed the pattern." "Okay," Emily said. "It wasn't just about not wanting to point at someone without proof," Carver said. "It was..." He stopped. Tried again. 12 years ago, I accused someone in this club of something they didn't do. I was certain. I was completely certain. And I was wrong." He paused. "It ended a friendship. It ended something that took 20 years to build and about 5 seconds to destroy. And the man I accused, he left the club. He never came back." Emily was quiet. "So when I started to see the pattern," Carver said, "I thought about what happens when you're certain and wrong. And I chose caution." His voice was rough. "I chose wrong." "You chose human," Emily said. Carver looked at her. "The alternative wasn't perfect judgment," Emily said. "The alternative was a different kind of mistake. You didn't cause this. Whoever is responsible for this caused it." Carver was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How do you carry it, the decisions that don't have a right answer?" Emily thought about Sarah. She thought about the moment of choice on a mission that went wrong. She thought about the 4-second window in which she made the calculation and completed the objective and lost her partner. "You accept that some decisions don't have a right answer," she said. "And you make the best one available. And then you carry the weight of it honestly instead of pretending it doesn't have weight." She paused. "The pretending is what breaks people, not the weight." Carver nodded slowly. "That tattoo," he said. Not for the first time, someone in this club had looked at her wrist and asked without asking. "Her name was Sarah," Emily said. The name was getting easier to say. Not easier to carry, easier to say. There was a difference. "She was my partner, and she died on a mission because I made the best decision available." She looked at the tattoo. "The chain is because I chose to carry it forward instead of letting it end me. A chain holds things together, even when it's heavy." Carver was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I'm glad you came here." "Me too," Emily said. And she meant it. The twist arrived at 1 in the afternoon. It came through Marco. He had been resting in one of the back rooms, and he came out at noon, looking better. The cut on his forehead was bandaged properly. Now his wrist was wrapped by someone who knew what they were doing, and he had the steadier bearing of a man who had slept and eaten and was coming back to himself. He sat at the main table in the clubhouse, and he started talking to Logan, and the conversation went on for about 40 minutes, while Emily worked in the garage and kept a peripheral awareness of the temperature of the room the way she always did. At 1 o'clock, Logan appeared in the garage doorway. His face told her something before he said a word. "You need to hear this," he said. She set down her tools and followed him. Marco was at the table. He looked at Emily when she sat down across from him. He had the expression of someone assembling courage for something. "When the vanguards came to my apartment," Marco said, "the two who came, I recognized one of them." Emily waited. "He used to be ours," Marco said. The sentence hit the table like something physical. Logan said, "Say that again." "He was a member," Marco said. "Not Tucson, Phoenix chapter. He left, or we thought he left, about 18 months ago. We thought he moved out of state." Marco's voice was steady, but his hands were not. "His name is Reed, and when he was with the Phoenix chapter, Torres vouched for him." The room around Emily rearranged itself. Not Torres feeding information from inside. Torres connected to someone who had already defected. Torres who had come from Phoenix 18 months ago. Torres who had been brought in by Carver on a recommendation that had come originally from the Phoenix chapter. Torres who had possibly been placed here. Torres, who might not even know the full shape of what she was part of. Or Torres, who knew exactly. Emily said very carefully, "Marco, when Reed was in Phoenix, what was his role?" "He handled communications," Marco said. "Internal routing. He knew who talked to who. He knew which channels were secure and which weren't." Emily stood up. She said to Logan, "I need 10 minutes." She went back to the garage. She stood at the workbench. She put her hands flat on it, and she breathed, and she thought with the kind of intensity that clears everything else out, every feeling, every uncertainty, every noise, and leaves only the structure of the problem. Reed, Phoenix, communications, 18 months, Torres arriving in Tucson. The information leaks starting gradually, small things at first building. Not someone gathering information opportunistically. Someone placed here. Someone sent here with a purpose. Torres as a delivery mechanism, or as a placement, possibly without full knowledge of what she'd been inserted into. Or Torres as a fully operational component of a plan that had been running for 18 months. Emily pressed her thumb against the raven tattoo. She thought about the training session that morning. The genuine responses, the real discomfort, the too clean skill set. She thought about something Sarah had told her once in a safe house in a country that Emily was not supposed to officially remember being in. Sarah had said, "The hardest targets to read are the ones who believe what they're doing is right, because the belief makes the performance true." Emily went back inside. She sat back down at the table. Logan and Marco looked at her. "I need to talk to Torres," she said. "Today. Now. Before she knows that Marco has identified Reed." Logan said, "How?" "I bring her in on the problem," Emily said. "I tell her Marco is here, and that he's identified one of the men who came to his apartment. I watch how she receives the information. I watch what she does with it." "And if she's part of it," Logan said, "then she'll try to communicate what she's learned," Emily said. "And we'll know." "How will we know?" Marco said. Emily looked at him. "Because I'll be watching every exit." She found Torres in the main room, sitting at the far end of the long table with a cup of coffee and a phone she put away immediately when Emily came over. No hesitation putting it away. No telling micro-movement of someone who'd been doing something they needed to hide. Just someone putting away a phone because another person was approaching. Emily sat down. "I need to bring you in on something," Emily said. Her voice was completely natural. Measured, warm enough, direct. "Marco's here." Torres's reaction was immediate and genuine. Relief concerned the particular expression of someone who cares about people in their community and has been worrying. "Is he okay?" Torres said. "He's going to be fine," Emily said. "He identified one of the men who came to his apartment." She paused. "The name is Reed. He was with the Phoenix chapter before he went to the Vanguards." The change in Torres's face was not what Emily expected. It was not fear of being caught. It was not the careful management of an operative receiving dangerous information. It was recognition. And underneath the recognition, something that looked startlingly close to horror. "Reed," Torres said. The word came out barely above a whisper. "You know him," Emily said. Torres looked at her. Something was happening behind her eyes that was moving fast and going deep. "He's the reason I left Phoenix," Torres said. Emily was very still. We were close," Torres said. Her voice was finding its footing. "We were close for about 8 months, and then I started noticing things. Small things at first. The way he talked about the Vanguards. The way he seemed to know things he shouldn't. The way he asked questions that were slightly off. Not what someone asks when they're curious, but what someone asks when they're gathering." Emily said, "Did you report it?" Torres looked at her. The expression on her face was the answer before the words. "I told the chapter president," Torres said. "In Phoenix. I told him what I'd noticed, and 3 days later, Reed was gone, and I was told it had been handled." She swallowed. "A month after that, I was told the Phoenix chapter thought I should move to Tucson. That there was a place for me here. That Carver had asked for someone reliable." Her voice was getting quieter. I thought it was a transfer. I never thought—" She stopped. Emily watched her face. Every micro-expression, every flicker, every involuntary tell that the body gives when the mind is processing something it hasn't fully caught up to. What she saw was a woman whose world was restructuring itself in real time. "You think the Phoenix president was already working with the vanguards," Emily said. Not a question. Torres closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something had changed in them, the specific shift of a person who has just arrived at the correct terrible conclusion and is now on the other side of it. "He sent me here," Torres said. "He moved me here. He sent someone who had raised concerns, and who might raise more concerns. He moved me somewhere he could keep an eye on. Somewhere I could be useful to them without knowing I was being useful. Or he moved you here so that everything you learned could get back to him," Emily said. Torres looked at her directly. "Through Reed." "Through Reed," Emily confirmed. The silence between them was dense. Then Torres said, "I haven't passed anything. I want you to know that. I haven't told anyone outside this club anything." "I believe you," Emily said. Torres blinked. "Just like that." "Just like that," Emily said. "Because the reaction you just had to Reed's name is not the reaction of someone who knew they were part of this. And because you've been here 2 years, and the information leaks are consistent with someone tapping into what you know without you knowing they're doing it." Torres was quiet for a moment. How? Emily thought about Reed. Communications. Internal routing. The specific skill set of someone who knew how information moved and could intercept it without the source ever knowing. "Reed didn't need you to tell him anything directly," Emily said. "He needed proximity. He needed someone close enough to the right conversations. If he had any access to your devices or your communications." Torres went pale. "My phone." Emily looked at her. 8 months ago," Torres said slowly. "I left my phone in the garage for a day. I thought I'd lost it. When I found it the next morning, it was on Carver's workbench. I thought he'd picked it up." She paused. "Carver said he didn't touch it." There it was. Emily stood up. She said, "I need your phone, right now." Torres handed it over without hesitation. The no hesitation mattered. It was the clearest thing she'd done since the conversation started. Emily took the phone to Logan's office. Logan was there. She handed him the phone and explained in 45 seconds what she'd learned and what she thought it meant. Logan looked at the phone, then he looked at Emily. "Reed's been running a listening post through Torres's phone for 8 months, he said flatly. "That's my working theory," Emily said. "Which means everything Torres has been present for every conversation she's been within range of." "They've heard it," Logan said. "They've heard it," Emily said. Logan picked up his own phone. "I'm calling someone who can verify this," he said. "Someone who knows devices. If there's something on this phone, he'll find it." "Good," Emily said. "And Logan, when you make that call, don't use the main line. Don't use anything that's been in regular use here." Logan looked at her. "If they're listening through Torres's phone, they may have mapped our communication patterns," Emily said. "They'll know if we suddenly go dark on the usual channels. We need to move carefully." "You mean they could know we're onto this right now?" Logan said. "Not yet," Emily said. "Torres's phone is in your hand instead of on the table in the main room. Whatever was being fed through it stopped the moment she handed it to me." She paused. "But we have a window, and windows close." Logan made the call. A man named Yates. Someone Emily hadn't met, who arrived in under an hour with a kit that told her he was either former law enforcement or former military intelligence. He didn't ask many questions. He took the phone and spent 23 minutes with it, and then he put it down on Logan's desk and he said 4 words. "Passive listening device software." Logan looked at Emily. Emily looked at the phone. 23 minutes was fast for Yates to find it, which meant it wasn't hidden by an expert. Which meant Reed was competent, but not elite. Which meant, and this was the thing that mattered most right now, he was probably working alone on the technical side. "Can you trace where it was sending?" Emily said to Yates. Yates said, "Already did. There's a relay point. I can give you a location." He gave it. Emily memorized it in 3 seconds. She looked at Logan. "That's their communications hub," she said. If Reed is managing this himself, he checks that relay regularly. If we move on that location. We cut the line, Logan said. We cut the line, Emily said. And we force them to operate blind. Logan straightened. Can we move tonight? Emily thought for half a second. Yes, but small. 2 people maximum. In and out before they know we're there. Ray Morrison appeared in the doorway of Logan's office. He had clearly been outside the door for at least the last 3 minutes, which under any other circumstances Emily would have addressed. Right now she looked at him and said, "How much did you hear?" "Enough," Ray said. "I want to go." Emily studied him for a moment. The Ray Morrison who had laughed at her tattoo on the first day, and the Ray Morrison standing in this doorway, were different people built from the same material, but shaped by different choices. And the Ray Morrison in the doorway was steady in a way that the first one hadn't been yet. "Can you move quietly?" she said. "I can move however you need me to move," Ray said. Emily looked at Logan. Logan nodded. "2 of us," Emily said. "Tonight, after midnight." Ray Morrison nodded. No bravado, no performance, just readiness. Emily left the office. She went back to the garage. She had 6 hours, and she intended to be completely ready in 4. Torres was still at the table when Emily came back through the main room. She was sitting in the same chair, and her hands were wrapped around a cold coffee cup, and she was staring at the middle distance with the expression of someone working through the specific architecture of betrayal, the way it restructures everything you thought you knew about a period of your life, the way it turns memory into something suspect. Emily paused. She sat down across from Torres. "None of this is your fault," Emily said. Torres looked at her. "I need you to hear that clearly," Emily said. "You reported what you noticed. You did the right thing. What happened after that was done to you, not by you." Torres was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I spent 8 months thinking I was here because Carver needed someone reliable." Her voice was rough. "Thinking it was a good thing, a fresh start." She paused. "And the whole time you were here," Emily said. "Doing your job, being reliable, taking care of this club." She held Torres's gaze. "That's real. Whatever their intentions were. What you actually did here is real." Torres pressed her lips together, nodded once. "What happens now?" Torres said. "Now we fix it," Emily said. Torres looked at her for a moment. "Can I help?" Torres said. Emily considered her. This woman who had been maneuvered without her knowledge, who had sat in a training session that morning, being assessed by the person across from her without knowing it, who had just had her past 2 years reorganized around a truth she hadn't known she was living. "Yes," Emily said. "Tomorrow you can help. Tonight I need you to sit tight and trust that it's being handled." Torres nodded. Emily stood up. She went back to the garage. She picked up her wrench. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. In 6 hours, she and Ray would move on the relay location. They would cut the line that had been feeding the vanguards for 8 months. They would remove the Phoenix president's eyes inside this club. And then tomorrow, with clear information and a full picture, they would deal with the rest of it. That was the plan. Plans Emily knew better than most did not always survive contact with the thing they were designed for. But you made the best one available. And then you moved. Ray came into the garage at 11:30. He didn't say anything. He just came in, stood near the workbench, and waited. His presence was quiet and solid and exactly right for the moment. And Emily looked at him and thought that people were capable of enormous change when the situation showed them something real about who they could be. "Ready," she said. "Ready," he said. She picked up her jacket. She pressed her thumb against the raven one time briefly, the way she always did. Then she walked toward the door, and Ray walked beside her, and they went out into the Arizona night. And the night was dark and dry and quiet in the specific way that means something is about to happen. And Emily Walker was ready for it. The relay location was a storage unit on the east side of Tucson, tucked into a commercial row that sat quiet and mostly dark at midnight. Ray drove. Emily sat in the passenger seat and watched the road the way she always watched everything ahead behind the mirrors, the geometry of what was coming before it arrived. They didn't talk much on the drive out. Ray had learned by now that Emily in operational mode was a different register than Emily at the workbench, and he had the intelligence to match the room rather than fight it. He drove, and he was quiet, and when he did speak, it was practical. "How close do we need to get?" he said. "Close enough to confirm and document," Emily said. "We're not destroying anything tonight. We're recording. Yates gave me software that will pull the relay logs every transmission in and out for the past 8 months. Ray glanced at her. "That's evidence." "That's a complete picture," Emily said. "Of who knew what and when. Of the Phoenix president's involvement. Of Reed's operations." She paused. "Evidence we can use in ways that don't require a biker war with the vanguards." Ray was quiet for a moment. "You think there's a way out of this that doesn't end in a war?" "I think a war serves the vanguards more than it serves this club," Emily said. "A war gives the Phoenix president exactly what he wants. Chaos, damage, your chapter weakened, while he positions himself as the stable alternative." She watched the road. "You win this by being smarter, not by being louder." Ray absorbed that. "Logan's going to want to move hard once he sees the full picture," Ray said. "I know," Emily said. "And Logan's not wrong to want that. He's protecting his people." She paused. "My job tonight is to make sure that when he moves with complete information. Not anger. Information." Ray pulled the car to a stop 3 blocks from the storage facility. They got out into the dry midnight air. Emily said quietly, "Stay behind me by 4 steps. Match my pace exactly. If I stop, you stop. If I change direction, you change direction. No questions in the field you ask afterward." "Understood," Ray said. They moved. The facility was quiet. 2 rows of units, external access, a single dim light at the entrance. Emily had memorized the layout from the address Yates had given her, and she moved through it with the economy of someone who had done this in places far more complicated and far more dangerous. She tracked the cameras, 2 visible, 1 likely, and moved through the angles they didn't cover. Unit 14. That was the relay point Yates had identified. She got to the door. Standard padlock, decent quality, but not exceptional. She had what she needed, and she worked the lock in 40 seconds, which was not her best time, but was entirely adequate, and Ray watched her do it with an expression that he managed to keep mostly neutral. She pushed the door open. The unit was small. Inside, there was a folding table, and on the table were 2 laptops and a small router-style device, and a portable battery pack, and a phone in a charging cradle. The setup of someone who knew what they were doing, but was working lean, no redundancy, no backup systems. The kind of operational efficiency that works fine until something goes wrong. Emily crossed to the table. She pulled out Yates's device, connected it to the router, and began the extraction. The software would take 11 minutes. She set a mental clock and began watching the 11 minutes the way she watched everything. Ray positioned himself near the door. He understood without being told that his job was perimeter. He stood there in the dark, and he was very still and very present, and Emily noted with a specific kind of approval that he understood the shape of what good support looked like in a situation like this. 4 minutes in, Emily heard something, not a sound. Something before a sound. The particular absence of the ambient noises that had been there a moment ago, the distant traffic, the air moving. The way things go quiet before they don't. She said very quietly, "Ray?" Ray stiffened. Emily was already moving, crossing the unit in 3 steps, pulling the door almost closed but not latched, positioning herself to the left of the doorframe where she could see a thin vertical slice of the exterior. Footsteps. 1 person. Unhurried. The kind of unhurried that means someone who has been here before and expects to be alone. Reed. He was of medium height, thin through the shoulders, in a way that made him look less dangerous than his file had suggested, carrying a laptop bag and a coffee, and the general bearing of a man who believed himself to be invisible. He was 20 feet from the unit door and closing. Emily turned to Ray. In the dark, she held up 1 finger. 1 person. She pointed to herself, and then to the door. She pointed to Ray, and then to the position behind her. He got it without a word. He moved. Reed was 10 feet from the door. Emily did the calculation in under a second. If she waited, he opened the door, he saw the extraction device, he ran, or he fought. If she moved now, she controlled the contact. The calculation had one output. She pushed the door open and stepped out. Reed stopped walking, his coffee cup tilted in his hand. He looked at Emily with the very specific expression of a man whose brain is rapidly sorting through multiple interpretations of an unexpected event and not finding a good one in any of them. He said, "Put the coffee down," Emily said. Her voice was completely flat and completely calm. Reed looked behind her. Ray Morrison filled the doorway. Ray was 6'3" and broad, and even in the dark, the fact of him was substantial. Reed put the coffee down. "Laptop bag," Emily said. "Set it on the ground." Reed didn't move immediately. She could see him calculating. She watched the calculation happen on his face, and she watched it arrive at the only answer available, and she watched him set the bag down. "Good," Emily said. "Now we're going to talk." Reed said, "I don't know who you are." "Yes, you do," Emily said. "You've been listening to conversations in the Tucson chapter for 8 months. You know exactly who I am. You've known since I walked in that door 3 weeks ago." Reed's face did something complicated. "What you don't know," Emily said, "is that the device inside this unit has spent the last 4 minutes pulling every transmission log from your relay. In about 7 more minutes it will be done." She held his gaze. "So you have a choice. You can stand here and wait for those 7 minutes to finish. Or you can make the next few hours easier on yourself by telling me what I want to know." Reed said nothing. "The Phoenix president," Emily said. "His name, his full involvement, what he promised the vanguards and what they promised him." Reed looked at her. Then he looked at Ray. Then he looked back at Emily. He said, "If I tell you that, if you tell me that." Emily said, "You walk away from here tonight." Ray made a sound behind her. She heard it, and she knew what it was, the sound of a man who had a strong opinion about Reed walking away from anything. She kept her eyes on Reed. "I can't speak for what Logan Hayes decides to do with the information afterward," Emily said. "That's not in my control. But tonight, right now, if you tell me what I need to know, you leave this unit on your own 2 feet." Reed looked at her for a long moment. He told her. His name was Victor Crane, Phoenix chapter president. He had been in communication with the vanguards for 14 months, 2 months before Torres had raised her concerns about Reed. He had not dealt with the problem Torres identified by removing Reed. He had used Reed's exposure as leverage to turn him. Reed became the mechanism. Torres became the unwitting source, and the whole arrangement was structured so that if any piece of it was discovered, the discovered piece would point away from Crane. Reed's voice was flat and careful as he said all of this. The voice of someone who had made a decision and was following it through without looking sideways at the cost. When he finished, Emily said, "What was Crane promised?" Reed paused. "Say it," Emily said. "Tucson's territory," Reed said. Once the chapter collapsed, Crane was positioned to absorb it. Full chapter, full membership, full standing. Phoenix would double in size overnight. The 7-minute timer finished. The device beeped once quietly. Emily reached back through the door and disconnected it. Full logs, everything. She looked at Reed. "Go," she said. He picked up his laptop bag. He didn't pick up the coffee. He walked into the dark, and he didn't look back, and Emily watched him go with the precise assessment of someone who knows they have not seen the last of a problem, but has chosen the arrangement that serves the greater purpose over the one that feels more satisfying. Ray said from very close behind her, "You know he's going to run." "Yes," Emily said. "You know Crane will know by morning that this is blown." "Yes," Emily said. "So why?" Emily turned to face him. In the dark, his expression was a question she owed him an honest answer to. "Because what Reed just told me changes the shape of everything," she said. "And I needed him to say it aloud, and I needed 7 more minutes, and I needed him standing still for both." She held his gaze. "And because the damage I would have had to do to keep him here was not worth what we already have." Ray absorbed this. Then he nodded. "Let's get back," he said. "Yes," she said. We have a long night ahead of us." They moved back to the car. Emily called Logan before they reached it. She said 4 words, "I have it all." Logan said, "Come home." The clubhouse at 1 in the morning had a different quality than it did at any other hour. It was not empty. Logan had clearly made calls because there were 8 people in the main room when Emily and Ray walked in, including Danny and Torres and Carver and Marco and several others, whose presence told her that Logan had been preparing for whatever she brought back. She stood at the center of the room and she told them everything, not in the measured, careful way. She sometimes delivered information tonight. She let the story have its shape, because the shape mattered, because these people deserved to understand not just the facts, but the architecture of what had been done to them. The 14 months. Crane and the vanguards. Reed and the relay. Torres used without her knowledge. The plan to collapse the chapter from inside and absorb the territory. The room was very quiet all the way through it. When she finished, the quiet held for several more seconds. Then Logan said, "Crane." "Yes," Emily said. Logan's jaw worked. 14 months, he said. 14 months, this has been running. "Yes," Emily said. "And Torres." Logan looked at Torres, who was sitting very still at the table. Torres reported what she noticed when she noticed it, Emily said. She was moved here deliberately. She has been completely unaware of the relay on her phone. She said this clearly, directly, with the weight of certainty. She is not responsible for any of this. Logan looked at Torres for a long moment. Torres looked back at him. Something passed between them, the specific costly thing that passes between a leader and a member when trust has been threatened and survives the threat. Logan said, "I know." Torres closed her eyes briefly. Logan turned back to the room. "So, what we have is a complete log of 8 months of transmissions. We have Reed's testimony on Crane. We have evidence of a deliberate, coordinated plan to destroy this chapter." He paused. "What we do with it?" Marcus said from the far wall. "We go to Phoenix. We confront Crane directly." "And then what?" Danny said quietly. "And then we make clear what happens when you come at us like this." "Marcus," Emily said, not loud, just present. Marcus looked at her. "Crane knows the relay is blown," Emily said. "Reed will tell him within the hour if he hasn't already. Crane is not going to sit in Phoenix and wait for 30 angry men to arrive on motorcycles. He'll be in the wind before morning." She paused. "And if he's in the wind, you have nothing. No confrontation, no resolution, no closure. Just a man who got away." The room was quiet. "So what do?" Marcus said. "We just let him go." "No," Emily said. "We don't let him go. We make sure he can't come back." She looked at Logan. Logan looked at the device in her hand. The logs. 8 months of Crane's transmissions. 8 months of evidence. "There are other chapter presidents," Emily said slowly. "Chapters that have been wondering why Phoenix has been growing so fast, why certain territories have been shifting, why certain arrangements have changed. There are people in this world who deal in exactly this kind of information, and for whom 8 months of logs from a relay point connected to both the vanguards and Victor Crane is worth considerably more than a confrontation in a parking lot." The room processed this. Logan said very carefully, "You're talking about making sure Crane has nowhere to go. I'm talking about making sure that every person in this world whose opinion matters to Victor Crane knows exactly what he did and exactly how he did it," Emily said. "I'm talking about the kind of consequence that doesn't heal. The kind he carries for the rest of his career in this world." Logan was looking at her with an expression she recognized from the early days, the one that said he was seeing something he hadn't expected to see. Ray Morrison said from the edge of the room, "She's right." Everyone looked at him. "You go to Phoenix with 30 men and you start something," Ray said. "You start something that the vanguards can use, that Crane can use even from wherever he runs. You look like what he wanted you to look like, reactive, angry, out of control." He paused, and something in his face said he was not entirely comfortable with what he was about to admit. "I've been wrong before about the right way to respond to something. I'm trying not to be wrong again." The room was quiet. Logan stood there with his hands at his sides, and his 19 years of leadership, and everything that Crane had done to this place, and every impulse that was telling him to move hard and fast, and instead he held all of it, and he breathed, and he thought. He said, "Danny, get me a list of chapter contacts. Every president who's had friction with Phoenix in the last 14 months. He said, "Terrence, I need the logs copied and secured in 3 separate locations tonight." He said, "Carver, you know people in the network who can make sure this information travels correctly. I need your judgment on who." Each man nodded as his name was called. Logan looked at Emily last. "What do you need?" he said. Emily thought about it for a moment. "Sleep," she said. "About 4 hours. And then I need to talk to you about something that has nothing to do with Crane or the Vanguards." Logan's eyes narrowed slightly. "What is it?" "It can wait 4 hours," Emily said. "It's not a problem, it's a decision." She paused. "Mine. That I want your input on." Logan studied her for a moment. Then he nodded. 4 hours. Emily went to the back room. She lay down on one of the couches. She pressed her thumb against the raven tattoo one time. She was asleep in 3 minutes. She dreamed about Sarah. Not the mission, she rarely dreamed about the mission. She dreamed about the time before it. A morning in a mess tent somewhere that she wasn't supposed to officially remember, and Sarah drinking terrible coffee and reading a paperback novel with complete absorption despite the noise around her, and Emily watching her, and thinking that the greatest skill Sarah had was the ability to be entirely present wherever she was, to not be elsewhere in her head, to inhabit the actual moment she was in. Emily had been trying to learn that skill for 2 years. She thought maybe in this place she was getting closer. She woke up at 5:15. The clubhouse was quieter, but not empty. Danny was at the table with a phone and a notepad. Terrence was at the far wall with a laptop, and Torres was asleep in the chair near the window, with her arms crossed and her face finally completely relaxed. Emily sat up. She found coffee. She drank it. Logan came in from his office at 5:30. He looked like a man who had not slept at all, which was probably accurate. But he also looked like a man who had spent those sleepless hours doing something productive, rather than just suffering through them. He sat across from Emily. "The logs are distributed," he said. 3 chapter presidents have already called me back. 2 more by morning." He paused. "Crane is already done. He just doesn't know it yet." "He will soon," Emily said. "Yes." Logan drank his coffee. "So, the decision you wanted my input on." Emily set down her cup. She looked at it for a moment. "I've been moving around for 3 years," she said. "You know that." "I know," Logan said. "I've been telling myself I was looking for quiet," she said. "For a place where I could be no one in particular, and fix things, and not be the person who knows what to do in situations like the last 4 days." She paused. That was not entirely honest. Logan waited. "I was running," Emily said. "I know that now, from Sarah, from the decision I made, from the feeling that if I stayed anywhere long enough, someone would want something from me that cost what the last thing cost." She looked up at Logan. "And then I walked in here, and you needed something from me, and I gave it, and nobody died. And we're sitting here drinking coffee at 5 in the morning, and I'm not running." Logan said nothing. He was listening with his whole body. "I want to stay," Emily said. The words came out cleanly, simply, without the performance of difficulty, even though they were difficult. "I want to stay here, not as a visitor, not as someone passing through." She met Logan's eyes. "I want this to be the place." Logan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Emily." She waited. "You have been this place since the 2nd day," he said. "Since the Road King ran for the first time in 8 months, and you packed your tools and walked toward the door, and I stepped into your path." He paused. "I've been waiting 3 weeks for you to figure out what I already knew." Emily looked at him. Something moved through her. Something large and quiet and real. The specific sensation of a door opening that you'd been standing in front of for a long time without quite reaching for the handle. "You're sure?" she said. "I am never sure about anything," Logan said. But I'm sure about this. Emily nodded. Once. The kind of nod that means something. Logan picked up his coffee cup. He said, "There are things we need to talk about. About your role here. About what that looks like formally. About—" "Not today," Emily said. Logan stopped. "Today," she said, "I want to fix the dinah in this corner that's been waiting for 3 days. And I want to drink coffee that's better than this. And I want—" She stopped. "What?" Logan said. "I want to teach Torres something she doesn't know yet," Emily said. "Because she's going to be good. She's already good. And she deserves someone taking that seriously." Logan smiled. It was a real one, not the careful, measured expression of a leader, managing his presentation, but an actual smile, the kind that gets through before you decide about it. "Then do that," he said. Emily stood up. She picked up her coffee cup. She walked toward the garage. She was almost at the door when Ray Morrison came in from outside with his jacket still on from the night before, and a paper bag that smelled like it had breakfast in it, and he stopped when he saw her and said, "You're still here." "I'm still here," she said. He looked at her for a moment, read something in her face. "You're staying," he said. Not a question. "I'm staying," she said. Ray Morrison stood there with his paper bag and his 22 years in this club, and the long distance he'd traveled from the man who'd laughed at her tattoo to the man standing in front of her now, and he said very simply, "Good." He walked past her to the main room. Emily went into the garage. She set down her coffee. She put on the work lamp. She opened her toolbox. The dinah was where she'd left it, the oil leak patient and waiting, and she crouched down beside it, and her hands found their rhythm, and her mind went to the place it went when the work was right, clear and present, and nowhere else. Danny appeared in the doorway at 6. "Torres is up," he said. "She wants to start." "Tell her 20 minutes, Emily said. "She said she'd wait," Danny said. He paused. "She also said she's sorry for whatever her presence here cost the club even without knowing." Emily kept working. "Tell her it's not her debt to carry." Danny nodded. He turned to go. "Danny," Emily said. He looked back. "Thank you," she said. "For the coffee that first morning. For not asking questions I wasn't ready to answer." She didn't look up from the engine. "For being the kind of person you are." Danny was quiet for a moment. "Don't mention it," he said. His voice was rough in the specific way of someone managing something they weren't prepared to feel. He left. Emily worked. At 6:45, Marco came in. He was moving more easily, the wrapped wrist held carefully the cut on his forehead, already less angry. He stopped near the workbench and watched her for a moment. "I heard you're staying," he said. "News travels fast in this place," Emily said. "It's a small place," Marco said. He paused. "I want to say something." Emily looked up. "I don't know you very well," Marco said. "We just met in the worst possible way. But I know what you did in the last 4 days. I know what you stopped and how." He paused. "I've been in this world a long time. I've met a lot of people. I've met very few like you." Emily held his gaze. "I'm glad you're staying," Marco said. Simply, without decoration. "Thank you," Emily said, simply, without deflection. Marco nodded and left. She turned back to the engine. At 7:15, Torres came in. She didn't wait for 20 minutes. She came in at 17, and she stood near the door and she said, "Ready when you are." Emily looked at her. Torres was standing differently than she had been the morning before. Something had shifted. The session, the revelation, the night that followed it, the morning after, something had moved through her and settled into a new configuration. She was standing like someone who has had a significant thing happen and has decided to be on the correct side of it. "You want to learn how to read a room," Emily said. "Yes," Torres said. "Then start by telling me everything you noticed about this room from the doorway before you came in," Emily said. "Not what you looked at, what you actually processed." Torres paused. She thought. And then she began to speak, and she was better than Emily had expected, which was saying something because Emily had expected her to be good. They worked through the morning. Outside the garage, the clubhouse continued. Logan made calls. Terrence sent documents. Danny organized. Carver sat with Marco and talked in the low, serious way of old friends, accounting for lost time. Ray Morrison ate his breakfast and read the paper, and was for the first time in possibly his entire adult life completely quiet without being uncomfortable about it. And at 9 in the morning, Logan's phone rang. He answered it. He listened for 30 seconds. His expression didn't change, but his jaw did something that the people who knew him well would have recognized. He came to the garage door. Emily looked up. "Crane's gone," Logan said. "Left Phoenix last night. House empty. Office cleared." He paused. The two other chapter presidents who'd been dealing with his maneuvering have already put the word out. He's done in this world. Emily held his gaze. "It worked," Logan said. She turned back to the Dinah. "We did what was right," she said. "That's different from it working." Logan stood in the doorway for a moment. "How?" he said. Emily's hands kept moving. "Because if it had gone wrong," she said, "doing what was right would still have been the right thing to do." She paused. "The outcome doesn't change the decision. The decision stands on its own." Logan was quiet. Then he said, "Who taught you that?" Emily looked down at the tattoo on her wrist. "The raven. The chain." "Someone I lost," she said. "Who I carry forward." Logan nodded. He didn't say anything else. He went back inside. Torres watched Emily for a moment from her position across the garage. "She sounds like she was extraordinary," Torres said quietly. Emily looked at the tattoo one more time. "She was everything good I was trying to be," Emily said. "And I'm still trying." She picked up the wrench. The Dinah's engine was waiting. And Emily Walker, for the first time in 3 years, was not thinking about leaving. She was thinking about tomorrow. 3 months after Emily Walker first walked through the door of the Tucson Hells Angels clubhouse with a worn helmet and a small toolbox. Ray Morrison stood in the garage doorway and watched her teach Torres how to listen to an engine the way you listen to a person, not for what it's saying, but for what it's trying not to say. He watched for a full minute before either of them noticed him. Torres noticed first because Torres had been getting better at noticing things with a speed that was starting to impress even Emily, which was not an easy thing to do. She glanced at the door. Ray held up one hand, not a greeting exactly, more an acknowledgement, and Torres went back to the engine. Emily didn't look up at all. "You knew I was there," Ray said. 40 seconds ago, Emily said. Ray shook his head slowly. He had stopped being surprised by this. He hadn't stopped being impressed. "Logan wants everyone in the main room," he said, "when you get a minute." "We're finishing this first," Emily said. "He said when you get a minute," Ray said. He meant it. Emily looked at Torres. Torres nodded. She had what she needed for now. They'd pick it back up after. That was how their sessions had started running. Not fixed blocks of time, but continuous threads that paused when life interrupted and resumed when life allowed. It was the way Emily had learned in the field alongside Sarah, who had once said that the best education happened in the margins of everything else. Emily set down the tool. She wiped her hands. She and Torres walked together into the main room. The whole club was there. All of them, Danny and Carver and Marco and Terrence and Marcus and everyone else, arranged around the long table and the edges of the room with the particular quality of a gathering that had been planned but was trying not to look like it. Emily stopped walking. She looked at Logan. Logan looked back at her with the specific expression of a man who has been keeping something quiet and is done keeping it. "Sit down," he said. "I'd rather stand," Emily said. "Emily," Danny said from across the room. He was trying not to smile and failing. "Just sit down." She sat. Logan stood at the head of the table. He was not a man who made speeches. In 19 years of leading this chapter, he had made exactly the number of speeches required, and not one more, and the ones he'd made were short and direct, because that was who he was. This one was short and direct. He said, 3 months ago, a woman walked into this clubhouse and fixed a motorcycle that 3 grown men had given up on. Some of us laughed at her. Most of us underestimated her. All of us were wrong. He paused. In 3 months, she has repaired 11 machines trained. One member, who is now the sharpest tactical thinker in this room besides herself, stopped a war that would have cost us everything and saved my life in the dark with about half a second to spare. He looked at Emily. She also never once asked for credit for any of it. The room was very quiet. This club doesn't give this to many people, Logan said. He reached to the table beside him and picked something up. And we don't give it lightly, because what it means is simple. You are not an outsider. You are not a guest. You are not someone passing through. He walked around the table toward her. You are family. He set it in front of her on the table. A patch. The Hells Angels patch with Tucson beneath it. Emily looked at it. The room held its breath. Emily's right hand moved the automatic unconscious movement to the tattoo on her left wrist. The raven. The chain. She pressed her thumb against it the way she always did when something was too large to hold without an anchor. She thought about Sarah. She thought about a morning in a mess tent, and terrible coffee, and a paperback novel, and the greatest lesson she had ever been taught about being present in the actual moment you're living, rather than the ones you're afraid of, or the ones you've lost. She picked up the patch. Ray Morrison said from somewhere behind her, about time. The room broke. Laughter voices the particular noise of a group of people who have been holding something in and are now releasing it all at once. Danny was saying something she couldn't quite hear. Carver put his hand briefly on her shoulder. Solid, brief, real. Marco raised a coffee cup from the far end of the table. Torres was standing with her arms crossed and her eyes bright and a smile that she wasn't doing anything to contain. Emily stood up. She held the patch. She looked around at all of them. Ray with his changed heart and his loud laugh and his quietly radical willingness to be better than he started. Danny with his steady presence and his good questions, and the way he'd brought her coffee that first morning without making a production of it. Carver, who carried guilt the way she carried grief, and who was slowly, carefully learning to set it down. Torres, who had been placed here by someone who meant to use her, and who had become instead something that person never intended, strong, aware, and exactly where she was supposed to be. Marco, Marcus, Terrence, all of them. Logan, who had stepped into her path at the door 3 months ago and asked if she had somewhere to be. Emily said, I need to say something. The room quieted. I came here running, she said. Her voice was steady, completely steady. I have been running for 3 years. From a decision I made that cost someone I loved. From the version of myself that makes those decisions. From the weight of being good at things that have weight. She paused. I told myself I was looking for quiet. For ordinary. For a life where nothing was required of me except showing up and fixing what was broken and moving on before anyone could need anything more than that. Nobody moved. What I found instead, Emily said, was a room full of people who needed exactly what I was trying to stop being. She looked at Logan. And a man who was smart enough not to ask me for it directly, who just made space, and waited. Logan said nothing. He didn't need to. The tattoo on my wrist, Emily said. She held up her left wrist. The raven, the chain. 3 months ago, this room had laughed at it. Now the room looked at it with the full knowledge of what it meant, of Sarah, of the mission, of the choice that could not be unmade and had to be lived with anyway. I got this so I would never forget her. So I would never let the weight of losing her become a reason to stop. She was a chain not to hold me back, to hold me to something. She looked down at it, to hold me to who she believed I was. The room was completely still. I think, Emily said, that she would have hated this place. A breath. But I think she would have been glad I found it. Ray made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite anything else. Emily set the patch back on the table. She looked at Logan. I'll earn this, she said. Every day. Not because I have to, because she would have. Logan looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up the patch and held it out to her again. You already have, he said. She took it, and the room came alive around her voices and noise and the specific, irreplaceable warmth of people who have decided that you belong and mean it and will keep meaning it tomorrow and the day after that, and in all the days that follow, when belonging is not a feeling, but a choice that gets remade continuously by everyone involved. Emily Walker stood in the center of it. She did not look for the exit. She did not calculate the distance to the door, or the position of every person in the room, or the fastest way out if something went wrong. She stood still. She breathed. She was here. 3 months ago, a woman walked into a room and was laughed at for a tattoo on her wrist. She was told by the way people looked at her that she didn't belong, that she was too quiet, too small, too unknown, too other. She was measured by what she appeared to be and found insufficient by men who had not yet learned the cost of that particular judgment. She did not argue. She did not defend. She picked up a wrench and showed them something real, and let the real thing do what real things always do. When given the chance, she let it speak for itself. And in the end, the tattoo they laughed at became the thing they understood most. The mark of a woman who had lost something irreplaceable and decided against every easier alternative to carry it forward. To let the weight mean something. To let the grief become direction rather than destination. Emily Walker stopped running the day she walked into the Hells Angels clubhouse in Tucson, Arizona. She just didn't know it yet. She knew it now. And knowing it, she held the patch in both hands, and she pressed it once gently, deliberately against the raven on her wrist. For Sarah. For herself. For the place that had been waiting without knowing it was waiting for exactly the woman she had always been. She was home.